Good evening, and thank you for coming to our meeting this evening. Please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, Laura. Allegiance to the flag of the United States. Thank you. And now we'll call up Zach Zeltler, our high school student representative.
Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Zachary Zeltler, and I'm the Student Government Executive Board Representative to the Board of Ed for the 2022 to 2023 school year. I hope everyone had a great weekend. As always, the students at JFK have been very busy with clubs, sports, and fundraising events recently. The week I last addressed you was Battle of the Classes week, with Battle of the Brains on Monday, Scavenger Hunt on Tuesday, and the main competition on Friday. In the end, the sophomores and juniors came out victorious. Congratulations. Also that week, the English Honor Society began its book drive, which will continue until the end of the month. Last week was very busy as Best Buddies sold bracelets throughout the week. Our Honor Society sold hot chocolate on Tuesday morning, and Spanish Honor Society began collecting supplies for the Safe Haven Puerto Rican Animal Rescue, which will continue throughout this week. Friday was the second blood drive of the year, sponsored by SAD, or Students Against Destructive Decisions, as well as a special visit from sportscaster Bruce Beck. Wednesday through Friday, myself and over 80 other students competed at the New York State DECA competition in Rochester, earning over 60 medals, and 43 of us will move on to the international competition in Orlando next month. In addition, Wednesday through Sunday, over 260 band, orchestra, and choir students performed at Disney World and had a great time in the parks, taking home a Mickey Mouse trophy. Congratulations to all DECA, choir, band, and orchestra students on your great accomplishments this past week. Now looking at this week, today kicked off spring sports, which will go through mid-May. Throughout the week, many clubs will have fundraisers, including English and Spanish Honor Society pizza sales on Tuesday and Wednesday, and Community Service Club main event fundraiser on Wednesday evening, and soft pretzel sale on Thursday. Friday, there will be a Kong Fu Tea fundraiser, and the junior class will sell green bagels in the spirit of St. Patrick's Day. In addition, throughout the week, the environmental club, will have an awareness table in the lobby. Looking into next week, there will be a Youth Against Cancer and World Down Syndrome Day awareness tables in the lobby on Tuesday, as well as pizza sales for orchestra, a cappella, and student government Tuesday through Thursday. Thursday evening will be the annual college fair, which is a great opportunity for students to meet college admissions representatives and learn more about their schools. Thank you. I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you, Zach, and congratulations to all the students, including yourself, for DECA and the Disney trip. And now our middle school representative from Matlin Middle School, I believe she's on Zoom, Tanya.
Yeah, hi. Good evening. My name is Tanya Raipatriwar, and I am the Matlin Middle School president. March certainly has come in like a lion, fierce with activity. Eighth graders participated in their first high school 101 program led by peer mentors from the high school. Matlin Student Council has been working on the creation of the mindfulness room to support all students and staff. Construction is underway, and they are calling on the students to continue the transformation by selling or purchasing items at a flea market to be held during extended MAP this month. 20 MAP groups have signed up to sell their homemade items, including glitter jars, stress balls, friendship pins, bracelets, a hot chocolate bar, and so much more. Drama cadets are taking the stage from March 23rd to March 25th with their rendition of SpongeBob the Musical. It will certainly be a good time for all. Best Buddies is doing another fundraiser. They are selling green bagels to raise money for the Friendship Walk, which supports inclusion for people with intellectual.
Okay. Can somebody tell Tanya?
We can ask her just to start over. This way we can provide.
I don't have her text. Well, I would assume that Jean does.
Take time and talk again. You can hear us?
Yes, sorry, what?
Oh, great. Tanya, we missed whatever you said, so can you begin again?
Yes, of course, Yeah. Good evening. My name is Tanya Raipachiwar, and I'm the Matlin Middle School president. March certainly has come in for Matlin Middle School, like a lion, fierce with activities. 8th graders participated in their first High School 101 program, led by peer mentors from the high school. Matlin Student Council has been working on the creation of a mindfulness room to support all students and staff. Construction is underway, and they are calling on the students to continue their transformation by selling or purchasing items at a flea market to be held during extended math this month. 20 MAP groups have signed up to sell their homemade items, including glitter jars, stress balls, friendship pins, bracelets, a hot chocolate bar, and so much more. Our drama cadets are taking the stage from March 23rd to March 25th with their rendition of SpongeBob the Musical. It will certainly be a good time for all. Best Buddies is doing another fundraiser. They are selling green bagels to raise money for the Friendship Walk, which supports inclusion for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The Matlin staff is gearing up for a volleyball game against the staff at JJP to support the Plainview Old Bethpage Relay for Life. Come cheer on your favorite school while supporting a great cause. Matlin Grandpas played a trivia game with their senior pals on their list trip to the Atria. Seniors look forward to the visit by their middle school friends each month. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. And now board announcements. Ginger?
Thank you, Debbie. At our last board meeting, we discussed the issue of a proposed resolution or bill proposed by Congressman George Santos about an AR-15 weapon. And this is our response that we as a board have put together. We, the members of the Plainview Old Bethpage Board of Education, write to you deeply concerned about your recently filed legislation, HR 1095, that seeks to declare an AR-15 style weapon to be the national gun of the United States. Paramount amongst our goals as school board members is to ensure the safety of our children and our staff. Your proposed legislation to make the AR-15 the national gun promotes the very weapon which has been often used to cause death and destruction in our nation's schools. Since the Columbine high school shooting in 1999, over 300,000 students have been touched by gun violence in more than 350 separate school shootings. Indeed, last year alone, there were over 50 school shootings, more than any other year since Columbine. The mass shootings of the following schools all involved AR-15 style weapon. Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas on May 24th, 2022, 21 dead. Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida on February 14, 2018, 17 dead. Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut on December 14, 2012, 27 dead. Co-sponsoring a bill that glorifies the semi-automatic assault rifle will only serve to glorify what has become a weapon of choice for mass shootings in our schools, which should be a sacred place for students and educators to feel safe. Instead, we are asking you to devote your time and attention to advocating for gun safety, supporting legislation that could stop the massacre of our students and staff. We cannot emphasize enough how disturbed and disappointed that this proposed legislation is one of your first acts as our congressional representative. We request that you withdraw as co-sponsor and pledge to vote against such legislation. It is never too late to do the right thing. Let us join together to protect all of our communities and to keep our schools safe. Sincerely, the Plainview Bethpage Board of Education. And there will be an attachment for our proposed resolution that we had for the New York State School Boards Association last year on what we considered issues of gun safety. And at this point, if there's any organization, anybody who is affiliated with us who would like to join in on signing the letter, we'd be very pleased to have you do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Legislative Committee.
You're welcome.
Other board announcements? Seth and then Jared.
So last week, a number of us had the opportunity to visit a few of the elementary schools for PARP and Dr. Seuss, the celebration of Dr. Seuss's birthday. I'm sure I know the PTAs put that out to the community. I think there were some pictures when we walked in up. It was great to be back in the buildings to see everybody in person at these celebrations. One of the things I like to do is when I go into the classes and I speak to the children to ask them as we prepare a budget, what kinds of things I should bring back to the board, right? And some years, some of the kids, particularly the young ones, come up with some very interesting ideas. This year, I wrote a few of them down. Some of them, I think the teacher prefers me not to share. But like carpeted hallways, softer toilet paper,
Judy.
books not so high. This was a second grade class. They couldn't reach the second, I think.
Oh, not so high.
Not so high. So either a bigger library, which all at the same eye level, if they could reach it, so that because they couldn't reach it so high. So which we suggested ladders, and one of them said, but that could be very dangerous.
That's true.
So we said, okay, very good. And then, one of them pointed to some flexible seating in their classroom and said, more of this. So it was great to be back in the buildings. It was great to speak with the students, and you could always rely on elementary kids to tell you all wonderful, fascinating things. So
For sure.
it's one of the fun things that a board member gets to do. So
Thank you. Jared?
I also went to Pasadena on Thursday for the reading, and it was great. I mean, I've told the kids that when I was their age, I sat in that same building as them, to which one kid asked if I was 45 years old. I did the same thing that Seth did and asked what they wanted to bring back to the board, and I promised them I'd bring this one back. They want McDonald's in the cafeteria, so we need to get on that.
Thanks, Jared. Gary?
I had the fun of reading to the kids at Old Bethpage also, and Seth had mentioned to me that he always asks, so I asked the same question. So they were very concerned about the recreational equipment. I was fourth graders. They wanted seesaws to come back,
It's interesting.
which led to a very good discussion about leverages and fulcrums. And I got to tell you, these fourth grade kids nailed it. They want a zip line from the top hill all the way to the bottom.
Sure, a zip line.
And then I had two young ladies who were insistent on us getting puppies.
I understand that.
But it was a wonderful, fun day. And I love that we get to do this. I've been doing it since I first got on the board. I think it's amazing that it didn't happen for so many years. And you're back in these classrooms. And I was just so happy to see, we all could sit next to each other. I had the kids reading with me, and they walked right up to me and read. And seeing that the classrooms aren't in these rows and columns anymore. They're back to all those things. There was one kid who was like pedaling a bicycle kind of chair. Others were on like balls and sitting at all that stuff that we said, this would be cool. I wish I had that when I was in elementary school. They have it again. So I was very happy to see all that stuff back. It was a wonderful day.
Thanks, Gary. Anybody else? I wanted to congratulate Dr. Dillon on his election to the NYSER Board of Governors. Congratulations. I also wanted to congratulate James Tinbra, a student who attends Nassau BoCES. He was the recipient of the George Farber Outstanding Student Award, which is given to a student who has demonstrated passion, perseverance, enthusiasm, outstanding character, scholarship, and a willingness to help others. So congratulations. And I also went to Pasadena. I wanted to thank Mrs. Newmark and her third grade class for welcoming me into the building and into their classroom, for being such good listeners, and really listening. And we had a great conversation afterwards about the book that I read called BU. And they also had some budget ideas. They would like more clubs. They told me about their animal club. They would like us to remove the wood chips from the playground and replace it with turf. But they do love her playground. Yeah, right. They'd like additional technology, and their suggestions were digital notepads, better Wi-Fi, upgrades of smart boards, and digital textbooks. I did say that I thought we had digital textbooks in the high school. And then finally, they would like us to provide snacks in each classroom in case someone forgets their snack. So I thought that that was something really sweet. And all in all, it was a fabulous morning. Sure, Ginger?
I also read at Pasadena, and we had a second grade class, and we had a very long discussion about bullying and people feeling welcomed. And they told me that they're getting a new student, I think in like 3 weeks. They were preparing for the new student, how they were going to be inclusive and no one would be left out of anything, and that they were very excited, and the teacher makes sure that everybody knows all about this kid and they can't wait to see this child come. And I just thought that that was such kind, caring words, and that they were so excited about it. We talked about different rules that should be in a classroom and everything else. And they said and talked about consequences if you break a rule or something like that. And they had it all. They had all the right answers. Great group of kids.
Thank you. And now superintendent announcements.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank the PTA for their partnership in making Park Week with all the schools really something very special. Each building that you went into really felt very different. They had their own personalities, but PTA was there with swag bags and some were dressed up, and it really made it feel special when you went into the building. I'd like to thank the board members and all the parents who came out to participate. I enjoyed some special time with Mrs. Sachs' first grade class. As a secondary teacher, I have forgotten when you ask first graders a question, you get nothing else done, especially when you bring a puppy book. So I heard a lot about goldfish puppies, baby sisters, and all that goes with all those little animals in the house. On Friday, I attended the Refit Legislative Breakfast. Dr. Dillon is the vice president on their executive board. Legislators and senators from Nassau and New York State were in attendance. We talked about topics related to the foundation aid formula, reforms for the tax cap and civil service, increasing funding for UPK, and pressing for universal school meals. That was something that was given throughout the pandemic. When it got pulled back, people are really concerned about children who just aren't getting enough nutrition during the week. It was great to hear that these legislators had a lot of information and strong feelings on supporting education. And I think that will lead the board well with that kind of spirit for our Saturday Leadership Summit. This Saturday, we'll have our annual Leadership Summit, staying focused on the goals that are included in the strategic plan. One in particular, a new one, we did have a goal of including all stakeholders in raising student voices. So this year, for the first time, we will have members of the student government join in the discussion this Saturday. I'd like to thank Ms. Lynn, Director of Guidance, who coordinated the SAT examination on Saturday at JFK High School. 52 students sat for this exam. Our administration and faculty continue to focus on priority area connections and collaborations. This week, Kristen Durante, Assistant Director for PPS, and teacher Jeremy Ritter from POB Middle School participated with our partners at SUNY Old Westbury in a presentation called Program Development and Supports for Students with Autism at the middle school level. This program was attended by over 350 participants from the Binghamton area, including parents, educators, and other administrators. Thank you for sharing your knowledge to the educational community. And two noteworthy accomplishments of POB alum. I ran into Gabrielle Oliva's proud grandmother at the Senior Citizens Club on Friday, who shared that our 2022 graduate and Regeneron scholar was one of 2 freshmen at the University of Texas in Austin to spend a week at the McDonald's Observatory. For those who may not know, Gabrielle is a rocket scientist that graduated from our schools. And also we found out, and thank you, Jared, for pointing this out, that President Biden has appointed a POB alum from the class of '89, Danny Warfield, as Commissioner to the Internal Revenue Service. So it's great to be from POB, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Meara. Jared?
Just one more quick thing. There's been a lot of talk about banks the past few days, and I think it'd be nice to reassure the community that we're fine with that.
It's really hard not to joke, but I will be very serious that we are not at Silicon Valley Bank. We are with Capital One.
Thank you. And now we're going to go on to reports and discussions. Our first report will be the Welcoming Committee and Enrollment Data. Mr. Donnarumma.
Okay, to join me for the presentation, I'd like to invite up 4 individuals in the audience. If Lori Lynn, Director of Guidance, could join us at the podium here, as well as Donna Lupia, PTA Council President, Dr. Ben Wiley, Director of Art and Digital Instruction, and also Leah Rivera, Director of World Language. Dr. O'Meara, do you want to give the lead in? Thank you.
So we've had several presentations from Mr. Donnarumma and his office, particularly around registration. And one of the things that we noticed was that the district is experiencing something very different, that we are seeing ongoing registration throughout the school year. And what it led us to believe was these children are not getting the same information all the other students receive, nor are their families, with the various transition meetings, the orientations, and how do we get all that information to them? When we redid our district mission and vision statement, we really highlighted the fact that we wanted all students to feel a sense of belonging, but that we would also look through every decision and every action through the lens of equity. And it's not equitable, particularly this year. We've had 274 students enter the district after July 1st, and they're not having the same experience because they come in without all of the information that the others enter with. So we commissioned a committee. Thank you, Chris, for leading this committee, for 4 very strategic and thoughtful meetings, and they'll share the outcomes with that. One of the things which leads into the next presentation Mr. Donnarumma will give is they notice the imbalance of how and where these students come in and to what schools they go to. The board had previously asked us, when you saw the health and safety report from December, to do some more research in that area. So some of the outcomes of the Welcoming Committee and the recommendations are aligned with that, to do further research on the imbalances in particularly Stratford Road and POB Middle School. So I'll leave you to your committee, and thank you for having them all here.
Yep, appreciate that. And thank you again for joining us. So we're going to take you through our journey. As really talked about, we really wanted to take a look at our process from registration, as parents fill out that application, all the way through getting into one of our schools and their experience as they're in our schools for our first couple of weeks. We really wanted to take a look at really what our process is to make improvements and to make recommendations. So we're going to bring you through our process, what we took a look at. Obviously, this work is important because it's going to tie right into our mission statement to create a safe, inclusive environment for all students to have a sense of belonging. So the first piece of data that the committee took a look at is something called Beds Day data. So Beds Day data references a point in time in the district. It's the first Wednesday in October. And what we started to look at is a 5-year trend of Beds Day data. So what I have on the screen in front of us is our Beds Day data for those 5 years, from 2018 all the way up to our current year, 22-23. And the first piece of information that's going to be important on that screen is you're going to see a 5.4% increase in enrollment. So that's going to start to frame out how many new kids we're receiving. Our district is growing at a rate of 5.4% over those 5 years. But what's equally important that I want to point out is that our cohorts. So what do I mean by a cohort? The colors that are the same going down a diagonal. There is not a cohort that exists in our district at a grade level that is smaller than when it came into the district. I'm going to give you context. Our current fourth grade students sit in a number of 419 in October. That number is larger now. When they entered the district in kindergarten, that cohort was 363 students. So that cohort has increased. Those percentages that you see are going to be varying between the grade levels. So you see cohort increases that range from a low of 4% as you move down the grade levels to a percent increase of 17.1% in the lower grade levels. So we have growth 5.4% across the district, but the cohort, every single one of them is growing at different rates of growth depending on where you stand. So that was the first piece of data that really grabbed our attention. We do have a large number of new students coming into our district. The next piece of data that the committee took a look at is the new entrant data. Okay, so we understand that the district is growing at a rate of 5.4%. How is that enrollment growth hitting the buildings? Is it equitable across all buildings? Or is there some sort of percentage that goes in one direction or another? So what you want to draw your attention to up top in the chart is that at the elementary level, more of your new entrants at the elementary level are entering into Stratford Road in Pasadena when compared to Old Bethpage and JJP. Your new entrants, as they come in after the year starts, they're moving into schools that are zoned to Stratford Road and Pasadena. So for example, Stratford Road has 55 new entrants out of the 270 at the time we prepared the data of total new entrants. When you take a look at that same data across the middle school level, you have our new entrants more at the POB middle school level than the Matlin Middle School. And really, to give context to that, 56 versus 26 new entrants when you're talking about middle school new entrant data. So that's important. So to just summarize, you have enrollment growth, then you also have a varying degree of growth at each schools across our district. What I want to do next is I want to pass it over to Leo Rivera to talk about some of the home language data that gets collected in our registration process. If you could talk to that.
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. One of the things we looked at is our home language data. And the way we collect it is whenever a family member states another language other than English on the application, we get a new application called the Home Language Questionnaire, and that asks what languages are spoken in the household. It could be an extra one, it could be an extra two. So as we broke down the data, we can take a look at, if you look at the yellow box where we have the 270 new entrants, you're looking at around 26% of those new entrants speak Chinese as a home language, as either the first language or their comfort language, where they're more comfortable in that language. The other, in the pie chart, we see English is 45%, but 26 is a large number. We'll look at Spanish, 9.3%, and Korean at 7.4%. So those languages are something that we're going to hone in on later on in this presentation and discuss ways that we're going to remedy that and be able to communicate with those families more effectively in those languages.
Let me just point out one other important piece of data on the screen here. So there's 4 charts of information that are very, very important up there that I just want to point out. So on the left side, you have your overall K-12 enrollment when they registered, what they reported as their home language. So when you take a look at district data, you have English that is reported as 88.4% as the home language for all of our students. When you take a look at our incoming kindergarten for this year, when the students registered and started the year at 381, the English that was reported as home language went down to 82.4%. When you take a look at our new entrants, kids that are in our schools that weren't here in June of 2022, when you take a look at distribution of the home language reported, when you take a look at English, it is 45.6%. And the reason I bring that up is the predominant language that the district communicates in currently is English. When we send out our communications, we send them out in English. So when we talk about experience for new entrants and their families, how do we reach our new families and make that connections better? You're going to see that in our recommendations. And then the follow slide is just a visual to see the breakdown of our new entrants in a pie chart. So really just a reinforcer. The next thing the committee took a look at is we tried to really evaluate kids that come into the district that don't come in kindergarten. What if I come in 3rd grade? What if I come in 5th grade or 6th grade? What is my experience? How do I catch up on the things that I may have missed in the earlier grade levels? And it's really, we took a look at it from the parent perspective as well as the child perspective. So we, as a district or as a committee, we formulated what we would envision a perfect onboarding system for our kids to be. And we started to really lay that out on an elementary level, a middle school level, and a high school level. So the next 4 slides, I'm going to quickly walk through. The next 2 slides will have similarities, so I'm going to push right through. So what we tried to envision, and you're going to see this in our recommendations, is the registration packet currently. It is given out in a predominant English language. So we took a look at trying to come up with ways and other languages that we would translate it into. And then also what's important is we would envision a welcome to POB communication. That's something when they're registering, have a communication go out to try to figure out what's important to tell our new families about right out of the gate, and our new students, what we want them to know about our district and the school they're going to attend. It would be important for them to have an experience in the building, to do a tour, for the parents to be offered as well, a tour of the building. And really the predominant piece, the overview, is what makes elementary so special. If I come in 3rd grade and I missed kindergarten orientation, what did I miss at that kindergarten tea in the summer? How do I need that information, or how do I get that information? That's really what we wanted to try to do in each of the grade levels. We also really started to talk about a peer support program, expanding our current program that exists on a K through 12 level, and then having a centralized place for people to go back to get documents they may want to revisit. So you're going to see the next 2 slides, very, very similar program. The middle school level would have obviously differences because you're talking about integrating acceleration for new families, what athletics is all about, intramurals, honor roll, agenda book, etc. And when you get to the high school level, there's even more that is new up at the high school level, because you're talking about AP exams, SAT, PSAT, off-campus privileges. What's that about? How do I opt in? How do I opt out? Student parking, student identification, locker use, and working papers. But overview, other than that, the overview of the program, really the basis of it would be really the same. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wiley, who's going to talk about our communication platforms, because that's a key to our recommendations as we really finalize the recommendations in this presentation.
Thank you. And as you can see, the committee really focused on the importance of communication, not only to the students currently in our district, but to our new entrants. So we reviewed our existing and current communication platforms that the district currently uses. And a number of these platforms, I'll go in depth a little bit later on, but they're opt-in services or subscription-based, which means that a user has to opt in or subscribe to the platform itself to receive communication. So as you can imagine, that poses some potential challenges for existing families and also new entrants. Mostly the communication tools that the district currently uses can be broken down into really 3 categories. One being just a broad-based messaging service like School Messenger, Remind, the website where information is shared to all students, parents, community members from district administration, building administration, teachers. It can also be broken down into social media platforms. We use social media here to communicate with our families. Apps like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Again, these apps are services or platforms that a user would have to subscribe to in order to get the communication or the information shared with them. And finally, we utilize platforms such as Class Dojo and Seesaw. Teachers use these platforms to communicate with parents of their students in their specific classes.
Yeah, and just to reinforce a couple really important points on there. When we send out a communication, no matter what platform it is in, it's being sent out in English. And when you take a look at the data that has helped to inform this committee, English is one of many languages spoken at home in this district. There are 3 predominant languages that have really come through in this committee, in this presentation. The next 3 languages that really rise to the top are going to be Spanish, Chinese, as well as Korean. Those are the other 3 big top 3 languages that we'd want to find a way to communicate in. And then the other perspective that was brought up from parents and really even the staff that sat on this committee is we send out in so many different places. Where do I go if I want to find out about X in the district? If I want to find out about, say, athletics, do I go on School Messenger communications? Do I go to Remind? Do I go to the website? Do I go to Facebook? Do I go to all of them? Where's the central place to get information about any topic that's important to POB? So it really did enlighten not only recommendations for new families, but really overall. Next part of the presentation is really going to start to focus and hone in on what our recommendations. We came out of this with 4 meetings. We had many different participants that really brought great ideas, but the recommendations are all going to hinge on 4 major areas, and we're going to talk about them in depth in just a moment. First area is student registration. That is the first area that lives under my domain that I'm going to make some recommendations coming out of this committee to make changes in my area to make things a little bit smoother for our new families. That's the first area. Communication is another major topic that we want to make some recommendations for the district to reevaluate its communication tools, to centralize and then streamline them. The central repository is nothing more than a central place, one-stop shop for families to go to get information. We really want to focus on creating that. And then the peer mentoring program is, how do we not only help our new students, but really it's more about our new families. How do we get them involved? How do we reach out to them? How do we support them? And that's where the PTA comes into as a key player in this role. So let's go into our recommendations. I'll start with my area, and then I'm going to hand off to each of the other members here presenting with me tonight. So in my area with registration, there's 4 main recommendations we're making to the superintendent for potential improvement. We need to streamline our student registration process to reflect current practices from NYSED, give different options for families. The traditional documents that used to be acceptable in years past, sometimes families struggle to get those same documents to prove residency or to prove age or to prove whatever it may be. There's flexibility, and we were recommending to implement those changes. We started with the onboarding of online registration last year. The online registration process has replaced the paper-based system, but we want to translate our online registration into different languages other than English. So that Chinese, Korean, and Spanish would be where we would start to make those translations. And really, that would be a nice place for families when they first enter the district. They're communicating in a home language, which is often going to be helpful to try to support those families. Our registrars, we have 2 of them now in our district for redundancy and to split really the workload. We would offer in-person support with translation services. So oftentimes when parents come in and they start to really get engulfed in our current registration process, we see some families start to need some assistance. Time starts to lag a little bit where we really start to jump in. So we have a process right now in my office where we reach out proactively if we see an application sitting to say, do you need help? But oftentimes, sometimes people need to be brought to the table to help out. What does this mean? With the translator to be able to do that. So we're going to be recommending that as a change. And then one of the things that I think is so valuable and so different than what we currently do is the correspondence. Yes, we approve an application now. Yes, we send a schedule. Welcome to whatever school you're going to. But how does a new family figure out what's great about POB or what's great about the school they're about to enroll in? And that's that next recommendation. Welcome to POB. Here's where you go for. And the same would be echoed by the building they're about to enter in. The building would also send out a correspondence to the new families to give and enlighten what makes their building so special to get them as part of our system here and part of our culture. I'm going to turn it over to really, it's Dr. Wiley again, just to summarize the recommendation for communication.
Exactly. So based upon the findings of the committee, the recommendation would be to look at various programs and to streamline the various communications into a one-stop shop, so to speak, a place where all families can get things like communication, publications, urgent alerts, promotional materials, and have that platform have the ability to translate into really hundreds of different languages. There are platforms out there that users can automatically set their translation or their home language to receive that information in that home language, or based upon what's received, they can choose to select a different language if they like to. So we're looking into that, and also to develop a library of online resources to explore the academic and extracurricular programs at the elementary, middle, and high school level. So as Chris spoke about, again, where do we find this information? It may be living on one school website or another department's website or a different app. So where can we house all of these resources via either our website currently or this platform potentially that serves as a place not only for communication, but as an online resource, a library, so to speak, so that current families and new entrants can go to that platform and find all of the information that they need, again, and have the ability to translate that information into the language in which they'd like.
Yeah, I just want to just give one point of clarification. When we talk about streamlining, it's not adding a new product without looking at our current products. We're looking to do some consolidation to get rid of some of those icons that are on the screen and really replace it with a product that translates and does a lot of what those others do. So it would be really addition by subtraction.
Jumping off of what Dr. Wiley just spoke about, we do recognize that the different buildings run orientation programs, transition programs, and we know how important it is to make sure that those families who are coming in the middle of the year and may have missed those programs, how do we address them? So, and in addition to that, ensuring consistency. Really haven't looked in the past to see that somebody coming into POB Middle and somebody coming into Matlin, are they hearing the same information or comparable information? So really looking at the consistency of that, suggesting possibly along with Mr. Rivera, putting out some curriculum writing projects this summer so that we can have staff members involved in putting that kind of communication together. Let's keep going, right?
Sure.
So we also discussed at length the importance of developing, again, a consistent and comprehensive peer mentoring program. The great news is that really exists in a good way in most of our buildings. Again, I think it's important for me to kind of oversee making sure that it's all consistent, it all looks consistent, and we have some non-negotiables and some key pieces that we are looking at in all the buildings, and really having the counselors prioritize in a very systematic way, ensuring that all new entrants are involved in a new student group, peer support programs. So I'll be looking at, again, consistency, developing protocols with specific timelines on that. K-12.
And I'm going to jump in. I'm going to turn it over to Donna Lupia to talk a little bit about the involvement of PTA. So we're talking so far a lot about what we're doing first to get things rolling, building new programs. But I think the most important work that we're going to do is to create the partnership with the PTA to get liaisons to really be the outreach of support for our new families. Like, where do the parents go to if they want to learn more about our community? What's important, what's not important, what to look out for. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lupi just to talk about her vision for PTA.
So not so much my vision, but the vision of the presidents and of the members of the Welcome Committee. Where we see this going is developing a new position on our PTA boards, somebody who will be considered the welcome liaison. So we'll be adding those responsibilities into each unit in one shape or another. As a board position, that person would then be responsible for getting that information from registration so that we are aware of when a new family comes into our building. And then in addition to that, that one point person, we would also like to go ahead and try and recruit through a digital survey, through PTA meetings, other parents, and whether those parents are, parents, by building, but if they have students who maybe have special needs similar to that family, or maybe they speak the same comfort language as that family, to try and match those families up so that they do have a closer connection. And then really just a proactive effort to welcome the families, not just once, but keep checking in don't harass, but check in every once in a while to make sure they're okay. If they have any questions, maybe if there's an event at the school, to coordinate to meet up with them so they have a familiar face, maybe meet them on a building tour, and just have somebody who is there to ask a simple question, because as we all know, we have so many great things to offer that it sometimes becomes a bit overwhelming. So be able to have somebody who can point them to the proper resources when necessary. And that's what we hope to fulfill.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have about the recommendations of the committee.
Just to start, I think all of this is absolutely incredible. One thing that I'd like to potentially explore, and it might not be feasible, it might be feasible, I don't know, partner with the PTA somehow. What I've seen them do with the state legislature in Albany, because it's such a diverse state, in the Capitol building, every couple of weeks they have a theme night, Bronx night, Western New York night, Buffalo night, whatever it is. Maybe that's something we can do on a different level and explore the different cultures that we now have in this community. Have a Chinese culture night, a South American culture night, something like that, and really expose all the students to each other's cultures in a way that a lot of areas can't do, but we're fortunate enough to be able to.
Great idea.
Yeah, I think that the parent commitment is a very big puzzle because you have to feel like you belong. And when you come in and everything is strange from a different country, from what you wear to a dance, what is a proper gift, what is this type of party, somebody has to let these kids know. And it's almost like you want to get some class leaders, also kids, to sort of adopt a kid and walk them through some of the processes that they have. But I think that it's nice you go in and you register and people talk to you. But now this is your building. And you're going to be invested in, it could be for 5 years, 2 years, one, it really doesn't matter. That child or those children have to feel when they go in, it's a welcoming place, somebody who understands that I am different. I think it was right before COVID, I was in, I don't remember which building now. It might have been Pasadena, and there was a young Korean girl. I think that's probably the last time I had read in that building. And she sat there and they brought in another Korean girl from another classroom and she sat next to her. And as I was speaking, she was interpreting to that child. And they said that they like to do that because A, it was both good for both kids. They made a friendship with each other. And there was a way of communication and asking questions because you can sit there and look very perplexed. You know, a child comes in with a disability, the hard of hearing. They may have visual problems. They may have just mobile problems. It doesn't matter. Children have to feel that when they're at building, they have friends and that's their home away from home. And I applaud you for starting it, but I'd like to see us to get kids involved also, because I think that I had once said that when kids are on a playground or kids are playing, that's a universal language. You share, you learn to share with others, and that's what's going to start to bring our kids together. But I thought the report was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ginger. Lauren and then Seth.
This is fantastic for parents and children who don't speak the language, but then for parents who are just not around as often as, you know, a 9-to-5 job that can't really get to a lot of the events. They work nights, they work weekends, and they can't be as involved and they feel like they miss a lot. So I think this is wonderful. And I just didn't know if this was something that has been looked into or can be looked into with a new platform or something that we've already had that we can look into, like, for example, like our portal that we have, or I remember coming home with my report cards, but now we have this like wonderful opportunity. Could we do checks and balances? Like, are we reaching our parents? And I know that there's so many, you know, ebbs and flows of this question because it's like, well, you know, there's divorced parents and they go to different people, change their email addresses, but you know, I guess it's our responsibility to, and parents' responsibility to update that information. But do we know, like, well, we haven't heard from this family, and you know, I noticed that this hasn't been opened. We haven't, you know, I don't know, through guidance or through, I really don't even know which realm it would take, but
Yeah.
just a check and balance to see if we're even reaching a family. Maybe we're not reaching a family and they're not getting any information. How can we check?
Two responses, and I'm sure Dr. Wiley would echo the same. He started off by talking about an opt-in program. That's where our platforms are. You have to say, I'm allowing you to text me. I'm allowing you to send me the message. That's our current platform. Other platforms don't have that buy-in. We consent to them regardless of opt-in or not. And then the other piece is when you onboard a new system, there'll be a data verification check. So some of the platforms we're talking about, just like you had asked, it's going to tell us what's broken, what communication piece, what email address, what's not reachable. So we can try to clean up that data with our families that we may not know about that's inaccurate at this point.
Right.
And
That's great.
and I just want to add, you mentioned opt-in as our primary way of communicating now. It's across multiple platforms as well. It's not just one platform that parents have to opt into. It's multiple platforms that parents potentially have to opt in or subscribe to get that information.
And then thank you. Yeah, that's true. It's a lot of platforms. And And on that, since we are doing the budget, I know, and for myself as a parent, as soon as that calendar comes to my house, it is like I sit there on a weekend and I literally put everything I need to into my family calendar, of what affects my family, what affects me as a board member, et cetera. Is there a way, I don't know if it's financially, if we can figure out which families it would better suit to send it in different languages? Now, again, with a platform like that, I'm making a face, but we can we can do it digitally, and I don't think that would be a cost factor. But to do it paper wise, I don't know.
We could look into that. Some of the platforms that this committee has looked at automatically puts it in their own languages. And what's nice about it, in one spot, they would get those reminders. You could put advanced notifications out. And the one in particular they've been looking at, the parents, depending on the students they have registered, they only get the information about, this is 12th grade information from guidance. This is 9th grade information from guidance. These are the events happening at the high school, or if you have 2 children, middle school, high school. And then the separate just for the teachers to text the teacher, the parents, which is lovely. They get the messages that way. But the calendar printed, that might, I know. We'll look at that. That's how many different languages, Mr. Donnarumma? 9 different languages. I'm just concerned because it changes, and that's the digital the digital calendar is the one that's the most accurate. Right.
Can I just also mention something? You're talking about the translation. So for sort of like official, correspondences in particular, what I'm helping Chris do is the intake forms, to have those professionally translated. But the rest of the things that live on the website, we do have a translate button, so it will translate it automatically. So something like the calendar might be difficult to translate, but since the digital calendar is the most accurate, up-to-date form, parents can look on that and hit the translate button, and they'll get the gist of the information of what's happening. The other thing too, even if you're thinking about like the grades for student, I know with my E&L families, I do try to take the time with them and let them know that they can view their child's grades using the portal, and I show them how to translate that. If they have time, we'll do a FaceTime or we'll do a Google Meet or whatever, and I'll show them on their computer or on their phone how to do it. So that way they can have it set up in one spot so they can see their students' grades as well in the language. And it's fairly accurate with the Google Translate as well.
Okay, great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Seth?
I echo my colleagues. I think this is a wonderful thing. To piggyback off of one or two things that Lauren had mentioned, this is not just for families who come in with languages other than English. This is for all families. And I know that seems to be what, we've kind of talked about translations and focusing, but this is for all families, right? Coming new to the district. It's wonderful. Nothing puts a smile on a student's face than welcome swag. So I'm just, to the extent buildings provide the welcome swag, that's a wonderful thing. As to the single platform recommendation that you're looking at, is that something that would replace the others, or would like a school messenger, a class dojo feed into that single platform?
So I'll take that one. It will replace. So it's going to depend on the product that we finally make a recommendation to implement. But right now, at minimum, it's going to replace 2 of those icons that are on the screen. It's going to be a duplication of effort to bring on another platform. So it would replace 100%.
And I think Dr. O'Mara started mentioning this, but if you have, say, multiple kids in multiple grades in multiple buildings, could you have just like the portal, the new setup of the portal, for those that see the new setup or not so new the last few weeks, where you have your kids pop up and you click on things that feed into is that like the same concept?
Yeah, so all of these platforms are based upon the students specifically. So all parents would be able to choose the communities or the pages in which those children or those students are subscribed to, and get all of the information, whether it be messaging from the school, from the district, or from the individual classroom. It's all based upon students. And also these platforms, which is a nice feature which they have, parents can set when the reminders are given. So you can opt into receiving messages like constantly all the time live, or you can set a time in the day that that you have to check the messages coming in, and they'll all come to the parents and community members at that specific time.
And that's similar now to what the portal is, right? Notifications, you can have it constantly pop, or you could just go in and
Correct.
and look at
Portals
it.
just for grading information. This is.
Right.
You
And
can
whether you have
join
apps
groups.
and
So if your
things like
children
that,
are in
yeah.
certain sports or certain clubs, you join that group
Club,
and then you
everything
get all the
embedded in there.
notifications that.
Sports, classes, school buildings.
Awesome. Thank you.
Gary and then Tara. Okay.
Thank you. This is all great. I would just ask, as we're looking at this, is it possible also to continue to look at our website? And because the first thing I think of when you say like central repository is our district website. And there's a lot of information there that lives there. Just to, we could direct people, but also make sure that it's easy to use, that it's clear, that I can't tell you how many parents have been like, how do I find Dr. O'Mara's email address? Do you have her email address? So it's there, it's on the website. So I don't know if we take a look periodically at where we house things and how we house things and the way that we organize them. But I feel like that could
There's a
also
lot
help.
of information on the website. We
Yeah.
agree with you. And it would be a goal to try to streamline that information, but it really would be dependent on what this new platform could house. What could be moved over there to drive that information that direction? Right now, the website is it. That's what we have.
Or cross-referencing each other so that one gets you to the other and like back and forth easily so that people can do
Correct.
that. That might help.
Thank you.
You had nothing, Gary?
On the page where you have the data, the pink home language, the home language kindergarten, the home language new entrance.
Yep.
That's by individual students, not by households, correct?
We're talking about here or the one before?
The one before that feeds it.
Yep. So
So
this
that's
is based on individual students. So
Right.
if there's 3 kids in the household and they report English as a home language, it's going to be represented 3 times in that number. So it's not household information.
Can we get to that data on a household level? I think it would be equally valuable information.
We can.
My other question is, when I look at the data and you see trends, right? What you got to say, what's going on? What's a trend? What's happening? So, it's clearly when you look at Chinese, you see it's 4.8% overall. The kindergarten has a high representation, and then you go into the new entrance, it's even higher.
Mhm.
When I look at Spanish, I see Spanish was 1.1%. It's 1.6% of the kindergartners, of the home language kindergartners. And then all of a sudden it's 25, 9.3%, is something specifically going on that's, just not necessarily a long-term trend, but something that, happens statistically that's maybe a 1 or 2 year, blip for something to be. I look at outliers whenever I look at statistics. The first thing I say is what seems like it doesn't fit with the rest of the patterns. So I'd be curious to dig into that, as well as we know we've got new entrants coming in. Were those new entrants 10 families, or was it, 30 or 40 families? And are the families with younger kids to still come in and other information to lead trends? This is a complex thing. I know you can't get a peek at it at 1 year.
Yep.
But I think over the next couple of years, if you keep doing this, we'll get a little bit better idea.
I'd like to respond to that first question or comment about the language data. And I think part of the evolution of the committee with analyzing and making recommendations, we started by trying to focus on what are our target languages we want to try to grab and communicate with. And then we started to figure out that would be a moving target as far as what the data looks like from year to year and what languages. So we want to get a product that translates and is driven by the parent.
Yeah.
So it's available in 100 different languages. And then you never have to worry what the numbers are or the percentages. The parent, regardless of what language, has the option to receive the information in their comfort language. The household data, I didn't think of that, to be quite honest with you, but I think it's a really interesting perspective to know the household version of that information. How does it slim down or consolidate into different numbers?
And that leads me to a question on home language. I didn't read what the actual question is that's given, but we speak this language at home. It's the only language we speak at home, or, we actually speak Chinese when grandma's in the house, but my parents make me speak English. And I'm not trying to single out any one language of this, but I'm saying how we communicate with the family is not knowing what languages they speak. We got to know what's their primary languages and where those issues are.
Yep. I'm going to turn that to Leah Rivera.
Hi. So on the home language questionnaire specifically, it looks for that data. So it asks what languages are spoken in the household other than English. So they'll have English one, parent one will have English, or parent one will say Spanish or Chinese, whatever it is. When it comes across my desk, either myself or my team, they reach out to the families and they do a further investigation. They either do like the informal questionnaire, they test a child to see what languages, but also when we reach out to the families, we find out what languages are they most comfortable speaking. And so we'll know. So the paperwork that I get and the spreadsheets that I have gives me the primary language of the household and the language of the child, and ultimately the scores that they have when they get a particular exam.
Because I think a primary language is a bigger challenge for us than the only language or for one of many languages. So that's why I like this data is great. I love everything you guys are doing. I'm just saying, I think we can dig farther and get even better, to allow us to target where we really need to invest. You may find out that a certain language is bubbling up, but when you dig further, you find out, but almost all the parents speak English because really it's because a new company came into town, like when Canon did. And, we had a lot of Japanese people move in, but they almost all spoke English because they were, Canon engineers and people like that versus a situation where they're coming in for other.
Got it.
Whatever.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Jared?
Just one kind of follow-up question on what Lauren had said before. With the email system that we have right now, I know that some allow you to, some don't. Are we able to track who opens it, not just if it doesn't send?
In school messenger, and that stuff comes to my office, we'll get that. I didn't get this email. I heard this went out. Can you help me? Why? And we'll diagnose it. So school messenger has a report. It's very labor intensive, but you got to go through, and it could be that the person has this blocked, that it's in their spam folder, but it also will tell us if it's read or not, when it was read, the time it was read. So we can help to get at that. But the problem is just like we talked about in the past, there's certain barriers to even start the communication that we want to really remove.
Right. So with that, I'm sure it's completely unfeasible. I don't want to take all the onus away from the parents to update the information, but if we see that somebody got 20 emails that were somewhat important and they didn't open them, are we reaching out to try to update the information?
Currently, no.
Okay.
Currently, we're not doing that, but we could look at that
Yeah.
work. Yeah. Any other questions or
I
comments?
just had a couple. First, I want to thank you all because I think will really make a huge difference to our community. So thank you. When we're talking about the welcome to POB communication, are we talking about any kind of handbook that, whether it's digital or an actual hard copy of the handbook, in terms of just common information that, like even on the sheet, the slides that we just looked at, there, of course, I can't open it now.
I could
I
pull up anything if
there were a bunch of
Yep, I have it.
the high school overview document, like
Correct.
all that stuff. It's great to have some kind of resources where parents can go online and look for it. But a lot of people still like, sorry, Gary, a
Paper
book
copy.
in their hand that has this information. I understand the language issue would be a further complication, but maybe something that has district-wide information and then a section that would be just about the school that they're going to, or
Correct. That's yeah,
is that what
definitely. Go
you're
ahead.
thinking of?
Yeah, that's what we were thinking. We were thinking about really, through some curriculum writing to have kind of a template that would be what is appropriate for district-wide, and then provide each principal with through a Google survey, have them fill in specifics for their building so that we can, have those specifics for the building. But a lot of it is, the general information. We talked a lot about just the acronyms that we all take for granted, and the example is, we all say join the PTA, and lots of parents say, what is the PTA, So just, trying to really break it down. What does everyone need to know? What do we want to highlight for the entire district? And then let each building principal kind of, determine what's specific for their building.
I mean, I think that would be,
Walk away with something.
yeah. And I think they like to be able to, I mean, I remember when I had very young children, that Dr. Spock book, I mean, it was. And so I think that if people had that resource at home, it could help them as well. And, like we're always talking about connections and relationships, and really that's what this is all about. I loved what Donna said about continuing to check in with people, because people need that. And sometimes they'll have questions after you spoke with them. And it's just a great feeling when you're new and you maybe don't know a lot of people, to have somebody, some resource that's a human being, to really give you some support. So really great.
Thank you.
Just thinking outside the box. We have children who don't live with their parents. Some live with grandparents, some have lost their parents through COVID and stuff. Are we going to make sure that we capture those people? Because it may be 20 or 30 years since you had a child in school, and then all of a sudden you're coming in with 2 little kids. You're at a loss because school isn't what you knew it to be. So we can't forget that group either.
Yeah, we're not leaving anyone out. We're trying to really, any new entrant that comes to us, and we're going to establish that. Who is the guardian? Who is the parent? How do we reach you? We're going to do that. And then they're going to have centralized information. So to me, that's important. So no matter what elementary school you enroll in, it's going to be similar in nature. What's available? What's special? Where do I go for help? What are the procedures? So I think it can help every student and family in the district, to be quite honest, the recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate
Thank
your
you
help.
all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
No, don't say that. Isn't it snowing?
And now we're going to go on to the enrollment data.
All right.
So,
Mira?
yes, thank you. So a couple of months ago, Chris Donnarumma presented his department's report, and we noticed the imbalance of enrollments, particularly at Stratford Road, and then the schools that feed POBMS. This conversation may seem deja vu-like because in 2018-19, there was a study done on, and it was called the Middle School Enrollment Challenge, and it focused solely on the imbalance between the 2 middle schools. At that time, the solution was to add more resources to POBMS to combat the imbalance. And since then, we've seen something unusual that has happened in very few districts on Long Island, but we're growing. And that, as we said earlier, and Chris just illustrated in the welcoming committee, that enrollment has exacerbated the problem. You asked us to research that. We have. So tonight, Chris is going to show all the data that we looked at in order to provide the board with some recommendations about how to combat the imbalance at both Stratford Road Elementary School and the middle school. The one concern we had throughout the whole process was something very unique happened during COVID, and that was we saw an influx of people from the city coming to POB because we had our schools opened. You had ordered us to have K-6 every day in school, and New York City did not open at all. So we had an influx of folks from the city come to the district, and interest rates were at a historic low of 2.8%. So we're wondering if some of what we're sharing with you tonight is a trend or if it's a one-off. So we're going to present a phase 1 option to you to combat some of the imbalance, and a phase 2 that, should you think that's not too aggressive and is amenable, we would explore further. That would include the middle school as well. If you are okay with some of the recommendations tonight, we would be prepared to come back at the March 27th meeting with a timeline to operationalize it, which would include public input on the recommendations. Okay. I don't think Chris needs to spend too much time on all the data because some of it was just in the previous report.
I'll
Yes.
try to speed it up past the information that we previously talked about. But it's interesting. Both presentations are tied completely together. So you're going to see that. So in this report, we want to give you some context about historical enrollment data. Like you heard in the previous presentation, you have enrollment growth across 5 past school years. It's 5.4%, and it's disproportional at the schools. We established that in the previous presentation. But what's important to start to focus in on is at the elementary level, you have 2 of your schools growing with enrollment, and then you have also 2 elementary schools shrinking with enrollment across 5 years. And at the middle school level, both are growing with enrollment, and both are growing at the almost the same pace at 5.5 and 6.5%. So I'm going to continue to move on. What we looked at next, which is really, really important, is what if we go back additional years with our enrollment data? What if it's just isolated to 18-19 to now? What if it's just a blip and it's not something long-term? When you go back with your enrollment data all the way back to 16-17, that's a significant year because that's the year after you close the kindergarten center. It's important to take a look at where the district was at that time and then compare it to your data this year. So back in 16-17, you had enrollment numbers at your elementary schools that ranged in the 400s, 407, 406, 449, and Stratford Road had 527 students. When you talk about current enrollment now in our elementary schools, you have Stratford Road that has increased from 527 students to 626. That's Bedsday data. That building's at 640 almost at this point when you take into account the new entrants. And then the same information, when you look down, a school like JJP that was at 406 back in 16-17 is under 400 at 392. I think it's currently sitting at 396 for students. When you take a look at 16-17, the middle school numbers back at that point, it was almost in line. You had 744 students at Matlin Middle School, and you had 770 students at POB Middle School. That doesn't represent what you have currently. You have almost 900 students currently at POB Middle School, where your enrollment for Matlin Middle School is in the high 700s. Even your enrollment at JFK has gone up, but there's just not another building to compare it to. So there's a lot of data on that screen. I can go back and answer questions at the end of the presentation if you have any clarifying questions. When you take into account 16-17 to 22-23, you're talking about 7.1% growth across enrollment in the district. What's important to just reinforce again is our new entrants. So we talk about trends where we have elementary schools growing, elementary school enrollment shrinking. The trends we're seeing with our new entrant is the receiving schools for elementary new students, new entrant. We really see the bulk of our students moving into homes that are in Stratford Road and Pasadena. When we talk about new entrants, there's 270 new students to our district. You have 55 of those and 38 at the elementary level going to those buildings where there's far fewer numbers at the other 2 elementary schools. When you talk about our new entrant middle school data, there's 56 versus 26 at Matlin Middle. So POB Middle School is more than double the number of new entrants that is basically enrolling after the school year started. That's real data. There is no manipulation of growth or projection. That's the numbers. That's what it represents, factual data. When we start to look at how we build our district and really project enrollment for next year, it's important to try to look at what the trend, we do believe the trend to turn into for next year. Some important pieces is Stratford Road is going to continue to grow at that pace. It's going to remain well into the 600s. There's no magical change to that information. We also summarize from the information up there that your spread of your middle school data is going to be more than 100 students. The middle schools, we think next year will be 120 students apart without any further growth or new entrants going more heavily toward POB Middle School than Matlin Middle School. And then we see our projected numbers up at the high school, right around 17, just a little bit over 1,700 students. This information is very important to take a look at, and I'm going to give you context. The previous slide was projections. Took into account new entrants. It took into account future growth to close out the school year. This data here is Bedsday data. So it's older data, absent of our new entrant data, absent of any future potential growth to account for our new students. What's important on this slide is that our middle school spread between the numbers as you move the real cohorts through grows from 120 to 178 to 189 in 25-26 to 26-27. We are projecting that the spread between the two middle schools will approach 200 students apart, where Matlin will potentially go under 700 students, whereas POB Middle School will hover toward that 900 student mark. So taking a look at historical data, real data, numbers, taking a look at our projections, taking a look at some of the things that we're working through, we want to try to summarize some enrollment challenges that have presented itself in the district because of those different numbers that we just spoke about. So specifically at Stratford Road, the enrollment at that building is up 18.8% since 16-17. That's factual, real numbers. It's 100 more students. The projected enrollment next year is going to be 200 students larger than your next largest elementary school, which is Pasadena. And the building is starting to exhaust the instructional spaces. That's the reality of what's happening at Stratford Road because of the increased numbers, increased staff, et cetera. Judy Jacobs Parkway is just the opposite. The enrollment since 16-17 is actually your down kids, so down 3.4% or 14 students. And the projected enrollment is really projected to stay flat at about 400 students next year. When you take a look at Pasadena Elementary School, then enrollment is decreased by 3.4% or 10 students since 16-17, and the projected enrollment is about flat for next year. The one caveat I would tell you with the Pasadena Elementary School data is there is a significant portion of our new entrant data this year specifically. So whether that's a blip or a trend is to be determined, but it does catch my attention, and it's important to note in the presentation of these enrollment facts. When you take a look at the middle school data, at POB Middle School and Matlin Middle School, we have different challenges that are really presenting itself. Your enrollment at POB has increased by 15.5% or 120 students approximately since 16-17. You do not have that enrollment growth at Matlin Middle School. It's actually projected to decrease over the next several years. The projected enrollment at POB Middle School for 23-24 is over 900 students, where at Matlin, it'll be in the 700s. The projected enrollment for 24-25, like we had talked about, is going to reach 175 as a delta between the middle schools. And at 26-27, we see it at its height at approximately 200 students in a difference. And then highlighted down below Matlin Middle School, we actually see the exact opposite trend where we see the enrollment potentially decreasing below 700. So now that we know our data currently, the projections on data, and some identification of some concerns that have been brought forward, we want to present you with some potential solutions, some ideas to further contemplate and think about as we move forward. So on the elementary level, it's really the concern and that we have is with Stratford Road enrollment and it hinging also to the enrollment decrease at Judy Jacobs Parkway. So one potential idea that could be put into play would be to adjust the boundary lines between Stratford Road and Judy Jacobs Parkway to shift the elementary enrollment from one building to another building, our largest enrolled building to our smallest enrolled building. And then obviously the same idea on the middle school level, like we once explored earlier in 2018, to adjust the boundary lines just the same potentially, where you're shifting enrollment from POB Middle School over to Matlin Middle School, where one building is growing, the other one is decreasing. How do we equalize those two boundaries? So just ideas to think about as we contemplate and talk about this more. You have the reason why those two buildings have come up on the elementary for conversation is they're bordering. So Stratford Road borders on the north side of our district to Judy Jacobs Parkway. They're the northernmost buildings in our district as far as the elementary level. So when you start to talk about what could be put into place, we tried to create of the bordering, boundary lines, quadrants. So as everyone talks about and starts to listen to this information, anyone that's in the audience at the table over there, there's enlarged maps and diagrams if you want to reference, and then same for the board here if you guys want to take a look. So as we start to talk about this conversation more, zone 1 would be a boundary that would be on the southern border of the Judy Jacobs district, part of the district. Zone 1 down here, which borders POB Middle School. Zone 2 would be on the northern part of the district. It's Stratford Road currently. It's the closest proximity to Judy Jacobs Parkway, although there's a dividing line with a major highway. And then finally, when we talk about Zone 3, that's this lower area down here that really goes down to Southern Parkway. What you have as information here is when you take a look at projected numbers by grade level for next year, how many kids do we know live in those current zones by grade level? So the chart down below would give you that information. When you take into account all of the elementary students that live in those three areas, you're talking about 113 students. Zone 1 would have a total of 25, zone 2, 39, and finally, zone 3 would have 49 students. What's important to understand is as you drill down deeper into these zones to try to define what streets would be included in zone 1. So this information again is for the board to reference, and for the audience, it's on that table over there. But zone 1 would include Cedar Drive East, Central Park Road between numbers 131 and 187 odd, Main Parkway East, Millwood Drive, Pine Street, and Radcliffe Road. Those would be the streets contained in zone number 1. And obviously you have that same information for zone 2 and for zone 3. So the next piece of information that I want to take time to review is potential enrollment for next year based on the impact of shifting zones. So the first presentation of enrollment data here is just taking into account zones 1 and 2. The next piece we'll look at is what if we take into account all the zones. So projected enrollment, no secret, we talked about this before. You have projected enrollment at your elementary schools where you have a range of 639 to start down to a low of 395 at JJP. If you elected to make recommendations to move kindergarten only, you will see the impact of those numbers represented. For example, zones 1 and 2, if kindergarten only moved next year, you took into account all of the students represented on the previous slide, your enrollment at JJP would increase from 395 to 407. Now, that means students that potentially would go to Stratford Road in kindergarten would be shifting to JJP. That's kindergarten only. When you take a look at the impact to Stratford Road, the enrollment is 639. Without those saved numbers, the reduction, it would bring down your enrollment at Stratford Road to 627. If there was a potential to open up the school from in those same zones from Stratford Road to JJP for grades 1 through 4, and if 50% of the students that live there took advantage of that, you will see more of an impact, obviously, to a decrease in enrollment at Stratford Road. It would go down to 600. And you'd see an increase to JJP. It would be going up from 407 with kindergarten only to 434. That takes into account that 50% of those eligible would take advantage of that choice to go to JJP rather than Stratford Road and zones 1 and 2. The last bit of data in the lower right-hand corner is what if everyone chooses to go from Stratford to JJP? You need to account and have that information available to know what it would be. If all the students that live in zone 1 and 2 in grades K through 4 went over from Stratford Road to JJP, you would see your Stratford Road number decrease to approximately 575 students, and you would see your enrollment at JJP increase from 395 up to 459 students.
And just to be clear, this is one of our recommendations that we think this solution would work in that it's optional for parents to choose when they live in those zones in grades 1 through 4.
Perfect. The next bit of information looks almost the same if you blink your eyes, but it's completely different. It takes into account zone 3. It's going to start the same. The story reel here, the numbers on 23, 24 projected enrollment, this is all the same information. Kindergarten only is going to jump up now. So 395, if kindergarten only is moved from Stratford Roads in zones 1, 2, and 3, you have JJP that goes up to 416. Stratford Road jumps down to 615. Again, the same exercise. If half the families take advantage of the options to switch your elementary school, JJP would jump up in those areas, impacting it. It would jump up to 463, excuse me, and Stratford Road would decrease to 568. If every family took advantage in zones 1, 2, and 3, Stratford Road would decrease from 639 to 523. but JJP would jump up dramatically from 395 to 508. It would actually be your second largest elementary school in the district behind Stratford Road.
And Chris, I just want to interject, and then we would have a capacity issue with handling that at the size of JJP. It
Absolutely.
doesn't leave any room for any additional enrollment to that building.
Yep. So as we bring forward to you data, we also want to bring, transparency of information and different options, but I echo exactly what Dr. Matter talked about. It would create potentially another challenge for us to consider at JJP. As you move forward with this exercise to take a look at the enrollment, it's also important not to also consider the middle school challenges that we have at hand, which is very simply, you have over 100 students difference between your middle schools. And within a few years, we see that number increasing to 200 students. So what could be some possible solutions to shift students from one middle school to another? And we use the same philosophy, 3 zones. What do our current projected students in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade? What do the numbers look like in those zones to see what the impact could be if we shifted one to another? So to summarize, zone 1 has 10 students that are middle school age students living in homes for next year. Zone 2 would have 53, a lot more students, obviously. And then zone 3 has 41. But when we pull it all together, we're talking about over 100 students in those 3 zones at the middle school level. Same exercise. When we talk about middle school enrollment, we know next year there's going to be a difference of 120, 914, and 794 are numbers we think we're going to start the year with in September of 23. If you had 5th grade only, and I'm only going to bring forward to you just the impact of 5th grade. We could do the same exercise if you wanted to for grades 6, 7, and 8, but for the purpose of tonight, and to not reach saturation on data, we're just going to talk about 5th grade. If 50% of your 5th graders in zones 1 and 2, the families opted in to switch them from POB to Matlin, you would see your numbers decrease by 10. We see that. That's pretty straightforward. One goes up by 10, one goes down by 10. 100% opt-in, you see your numbers from POB Middle School, 914 goes down to 795. Now you're down below 900 students for an enrollment. And then the same impact over at Matlin, same numbers are going to get added. So now you have middle school enrollment that are in the 800s at both, and they're about 82 students apart. That's taking into account only 5th grade, only in zones 1 and 2. Same information, but bringing into play zone 3, you're going to see more of an impact. And if 50% of the students opted in, your numbers would be a spread of 90 students apart. And if 100% of your 5th graders opted in those zones to switch from POB to Matlin, you'd see a spread of 58 students. That's just taking into account one grade level. And I say that way because you'd also have to think about what would potentially be the plan for grades 6, 7, and 8, and how would that enrollment would shake out between those 2 middle schools? Would it create that same concern that we have about JJP on the elementary level? Other considerations, phase 3, long-term, after we follow this data a little bit more closely, could be to take a look at different parts of our district. For example, zone 4, one of the things to consider is that there could be a shift of enrollment at Pasadena over to Old Bethpage. Just some general information as far as numbers, very preliminary data. Another zone that may be considered is we actually have a part of Stratford Road that is below Old Country Road, South Old Country Road, and borders the zone for Pasadena. It's close proximity to Pasadena, and maybe another factor to consider that zone as well in future years, how that could help us with these challenges that we have. And with that, I'll turn it to the board for any questions or concerns.
Okay, so I just want to talk through the recommendation right now, just so I have a good grasp on it. And I understand that we're looking at the current data, and the reason why you're suggesting in phases is because we have to determine if this is a blip or a trend. You looked at the 5.4% increase. We looked at 266 students,
Mhm.
but more than 55% of that happened from last year to this year.
Mhm.
So I know that we're saying that the average over 5 years is 5.4%.
Yep.
But of the 266 students, 147 of them weren't with us last year, like
Yeah.
147 out of that. So
Valid.
it's really just over this past year. So the question is this just a blip or is this a trend?
Mhm.
And does the phasing, obviously, even before this past year, 4 years ago, we had this conversation. We knew that there were changes in enrollment. Obviously, no one anticipated a pandemic or other impacts of enrollment. So the recommendation that we're looking to explore is to really the pressure that you've identified is at Stratford Road primarily.
Correct.
Okay. And that will over time free up the pressure on the middle school as well, is the plan.
Correct.
So the recommendation is not zones 1, 2, and 3, but simply zones 1 and 2.
That would be our recommendation, is to really just focus on those two zones. We think if we bring into zone 3 into play, it's going to put too much pressure in areas we don't want to do.
So the families that are currently in zone 102 with kids that are in our district are grandfathered in to wherever they are.
Correct.
Okay. And if you have a kid currently in K through 3 for next year, if you would want to move your kid to JJP, you can, but you don't have to.
Correct.
For any future entrance to the school district, in other words, if you're currently in zone 1 or 2, but you've never had a kid in our buildings at all, you haven't joined the POB district yet in kindergarten, or any future entrance to zones 1 or 2 next year, the year after, they're now going to be zoned for JJP.
Correct.
If I have I'm kind of talking through to make sure I understand this. Okay.
Yep.
I have a child in 4th grade at Stratford in zone 1 or 2.
Mhm.
The recommendation as part of the phase 2 would be I can have my child move to 5th grade into Matlin Middle School.
Yes.
So I could shift all of my kids. Theoretically, I could split my kids up if I really want to, but that's my choice if I live there.
Yeah. I think just to just echo what you're
So far,
really
so
just
good.
summarizing is
That one,
Yeah,
yes, I have
yeah.
one more scenario.
I
And that
gotcha.
is, I have someone that I'm in zone 1 or 2, and I have a current 2nd grader at Stratford, but I have a current 6th grader at POB Middle School. Can I choose under this scenario to shift my whole family?
That would be our recommendation.
JP and also to Matlin Middle School.
Yeah, we wouldn't see the harm in switching the middle school child as well, because it's part of this whole, the problem doesn't exist in one part of your school district or in one school. It's the elementary challenge is equally a challenge at the middle school level. So to me, I would recommend the choice. If you have children other than kindergarten that are in play, if they want to stay where they are, we should take that into account. That's what's best for the kid. But we also should provide that option for both kids to go to JJP. And if there is a POB middle school 5th grader, or even 6th or 7th or 8th grader, in my opinion, we should provide that as an option for those students to also, as a family, move to Matlin Middle School.
But that only is if I have a family who's
who's
in zone 1 or 2 and also is currently in K through 4. So in other words, if I just have a current 7th grader at POB, but I live in zone 1 or 2, I can't switch schools next year under the current plan.
Yeah, I would too. To me,
We can support that in 1 or 2 because we have the room in Matlin to do that. And
So-
what it actually does is the urgency that you must address as a board. I mean, we don't want to sugarcoat this. You must address the Stratford Road issue. That is mission critical.
I mean, so
The middle
essentially what-
school, we showed you, if you don't do
Right.
anything, you're going to
It's
be
gonna
here
take
with
4 or 5 years.
other
It's gonna
people and
take-
say, we told you so
Right.
in 2028. However, we have enough room to give that flexibility to zones 1 and 2 in grades 5 to 8, 5 to 7 this year to
So
go to
essentially what we're
Matlin.
saying is current students K through 7 that are in zone 1 and 2 have the option of shifting
To JJP and Matlin Middle School.
But, and remember, the ultimate goal, unless we find out in 3 years' time, it really was a blip and it's gone the other way. All of a sudden, JJP starts growing exponentially and Stratford Road becomes empty. The most important thing, though, that might have been missed is any family that's just brand new to the district. They have no other children here. They have a 4-year-old right now that they're about to register or have just registered, and they're living in zone 1 or 2. Our recommendation is that would be the mandatory rezone, that those families have to send their
Phase that
kids
in.
to JJP. They don't get a choice because remember, we always keep children at the forefront of our decisions. They don't know anything yet because they haven't been to any of our schools. And the only thing they might be like, oh, I thought I was going to Stratford, but now I'm going to JJP. And that happens. And remember, you haven't redistricted in over 20 years and there's been new builds, there's been different trends. So you have to look at this from time to time, and this is the time to do it. But from 1 through 7th grade, it's all optional, and 1 to 2 is our recommendation to go to JJP or Matlin. You can mix up your family, but the only one that we would ask you to maybe consider being a little bit more hard on is the kindergartners that don't have any other siblings, incoming K that don't have any other siblings.
And even
Nobody's been in POB district.
Correct.
And also to include our new entrants too, we may want to consider those to be brand new families, regardless
Well,
if
they
it's
wouldn't have
kindergarten,
any- yeah.
new entrants to go to JJP and Matlin.
Wait, so are you saying that if I'm a new entrant in 3rd grade, going to Stratford Road, right now zoned for Stratford Road.
JJP.
One.
Put them into
or
JJP.
2, you would put them to JJP.
Yeah.
So every home in 1 or 2 with no students in it would be zoned
Mhm.
for JJP and Matlin from this point forward.
Correct.
Yeah. And we would have. Sorry, Tara.
Okay, so before I start like commenting and peppering you with all kinds of questions, I do want to thank the central administration, everyone that put all the work into this, because when we started talking about this a while ago, I was adamant to the extent that we could minimize the impact on our current students and families who just came back from COVID at being out of school, who have moved, that's, I think, ideal, the situation, ideally. And after listening to the discussions and debates from years ago, shortly before I actually was on the board, it seems like to me that would make the most sense. And addressing it with people that aren't currently here is, the ability to do that is great. And I want to thank you for looking at those numbers and taking that into account. And then to phase it in so that people have the option. I have 3 kids, one's in 1st grade, one's in 4th grade, and one's in 6th grade. So if this were to be my family, this would be something that I would need to very strongly consider for each of my children and what works for our family in general. And so allowing the phase in for each family to decide how it's going to impact them moving forward, I think is the least painful, I guess, for each of, for our community. I recognize that we have like a fiscal responsibility to not just throw money at a problem and actually address some of these issues. So I recognize that there is a need to restructure the way that we look at our zoning rather than just adding on to buildings. I don't think it's really makes sense to add on to Stratford like we did with the other buildings. So, and I appreciate that you've looked at the capacity at each of these buildings, hopefully including POB middle, because we had an issue before. I don't know where we would house those extra 200 kids. That being said,
Questions?
these are great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wiley. He helped out with
Thank you, Dr.
all the
Wiley.
printouts and putting that together. That's not me.
This is so much easier for me to look at. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or what, but it was harder on the computer. Okay, so I think you explained a little bit why 1, 2, not 3.
Sure. So, yeah, so basically priority order, when you take a look at, and I have the zones up here, the logical first zone to take a look at changing is going to be the zone that's just north of POB Middle School that is directly connected to JJP. But another factor in this is the Seaford Oyster Bay Expressway. the navigation and transportation of students to a new elementary school. So that's another factor. So close proximity, but also transporting the kids back and forth. So one was definitely the first place we took a look at. And then the next logical place, the closest of the areas, even though it's a short distance, zone 2 would be the area that is basically in alignment on the north side of the district right there, zone 2 to JJP. Furthest away would be zone number 3. And we just took an approach at looking at getting the kids or having them be closest to their new elementary school. That's the reality of really the route on identifying those zones in that order.
Okay. And I do recognize when looking at this that zone 1 is directly next to
Yeah,
POB middle.
it is.
Zone 2, you have to cross over to get to
Yep.
Matlin, but also for zone 3, you would as well. But
Correct.
there's no perfect science, I guess, to all of the buildings.
Yeah, you really only have one divider, which is present there between these two buildings, between your smallest enrolled elementary and your largest enrolled. So you have those areas to really try to take a look at and analyze. But I still would stand behind those recommendations, even if you tried to play this out further with transportation. Zone 1 could be consolidated into existing routes that border or already exist at JJP. And then transporting the kids in zone 2, that would take additional focus and routes to be able to do. But it's going to be quicker to loop them around on the north side than it is to go down and around and up, back up to JJP. So it's just other factors to consider as you start to really take a look more deeply at these basically options.
Okay. I guess, I did note that like for some of the other recommendations, possibly we got into the zone 4 and 5. Those are
Long-term.
long-term.
Long-term. And really what I would recommend is start to hone in on what the first step would be,
Yeah.
but then to follow the enrollment trends. It's important what Seth had talked about the enrollment growth for this past year. It is something that catches your attention, but like I've heard several times, is it a blip or is it a trend? And if we have continual growth at a high number and is targeted in those areas, you may be, forced to make some additional decisions where maybe zone 3 comes into play at an elementary level. So to take a step and really combat in what we know to be a real concern, legitimate concern on Stratford Road, but then continue to follow the data to see what else is necessary.
Okay.
It's not just a one-time thing for us to look at.
Yeah. Cause, and we're going to obviously do it with an eye toward minimizing impact to the extent we can. Cause I did notice that like Old Path's numbers were at one point up 10.4%.
Yep.
Stratford's up a lot, but we've been keeping an eye on the Stratford numbers because it's just a different experience, potentially
200 more students.
having an elementary school with a third more students. Pasadena was down, but we have additional space there. But I think we were concerned about Pasadena space. That's why we added the classrooms. Yeah, JJP, we had done it. Old Beth, we did it. Okay, so and you're keeping an eye on the amount of room we have in each of the buildings as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then let's see. Sorry.
No problem.
In terms of opting in to address the middle school issue while we're at it.
Okay.
If we did, well, let me back up for a second. The option with the K with 50% opt-in for zones 1, 2, and 3.
Mhm.
Would that complicate things? Because then what happens in zone 3? Like, would that make it so that the whole area is not rezoned because that doesn't make sense in terms of capacity at JJP?
So to me, when we talk about what zones to consider, I'm going to stress it again. I would not consider an option at this time that includes zone 3 when you're building into also the mix zones 1 and 2. That would be potentially too much pressure at JJP. So our recommendation, clear as day, is just to take a look at zones 1 and 2 at this time.
But is that partially because that way it's consistent and constant that people coming into the district buying that, some people be thrilled that their house is now zoned for JJP. That may be helpful to them. They may, think that's good for their home value. Some people may not feel great about it, but at the end of the day, to keep a consistent, to the extent we can, idea of where students and houses are zoned for.
Mhm.
And if you did that, if you did like 50% opt-in with kindergarten in 1, 2, and 3, you wouldn't be able to sustain that.
Now, and specifically, I want to be really, really crystal clear here. I would be, and Dr. O'Mara would echo the same, and my colleagues. JJP had a number at 510 students. That's, we don't have the capacity for that. We know that and played out those numbers. So that's why the recommendation would not be at the end of the day to include all 3 zones. And when you look at this and analyze it, you have to prepare for 100% buy-in for
Eventual,
all of the
right?
grade levels.
Right.
So no, that wouldn't be.
It might look okay with the 50% opt-in short term, but long term, it would not
Ultimately,
make
it
sense.
won't be an option
Mhm.
at some point in time.
Okay, thank you. And then opt-in to address the middle school. I like that. I had said, I may want to prepare my kids to get them ready. So, and I love the idea of opting in. So if you have a child who is in kindergarten or first grade, and then you have a 3rd grader,
Mhm.
and they're eventually going to go to Matlin,
Yeah.
and you're moving their elementary schools, rather than like having them sort of go into Matlin, hoping
same
that they meet their
experience,
friends on the
share the
soccer
same
field
school.
and
Yeah.
baseball field, that they might have the opportunity to meet the kids there and develop the friendships that they've had for 2 or 3 years before they move on to middle school, which is already difficult in and of itself.
What I like about our conversation so far is the current families it gives option to. There's no force with current families. It's new families, people that aren't here yet to potentially have that as no option. But to your point, some people may feel comfortable not doing this, and some people may feel comfortable. I want to move all my kids, have an elementary, have a middle. I want them all to go to the same middle school.
Right. And the new people to the district, that it minimizes the impact unless there's something we don't know about in terms of their household. And then with regard to opting into middle school, to address that earlier, we
Yes.
can open that up as well.
Would be our recommendation that we would provide that option right up to the current 7th grade, like has been discussed. I wouldn't be concerned at all if there were a group of students that took advantage of that currently at POB and they want to shift over to Matlin. It would help to reduce the delta that we're really concerned about at the middle school level. We don't want it to see that 200 number. We have that existing between our elementary schools right now. We don't want that to get there at the middle school as well.
So it's like we're restructuring it, and the zones for 1 and 2 will be JJP and Matlin. And then we have an exception to grandfather in people. And if families choose to break up to different, Seth wants to send 3 of the kids and 1 of the kids, they can do that. But ultimately, once you make that choice going over to JJP or Matlin, there's no backseas, right?
That would be our wish. Yeah. Not to go back and forth between schools. Yeah.
Okay. I know this was a ton. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for the feedback.
Just because I think people got confused listening to this rock a little bit. So I just want to. The 50% opt-in is just for demonstration purposes.
Correct.
The goal of
Scenario.
this program is that everyone who chooses would get in. There would be no lotteries where you might get in, you might not. So the point was have enough capacity so that 100% of the people who wanted to opt in could move over to JGP.
Correct.
Option zone 3 would be if no one chose and we had to still correct the situation, because we want to do this in a way that everyone who chooses an option gets the option they want, with the ultimate goal being of alleviating the pressure on Stratford Road and eventually also POB Middle versus Mallon. But I love that we're doing this, but I hate the idea of anything that results in lotteries and things like that, because at that point people start thinking there's games being played and other things happening. And
no part of our plan includes a lottery system at all.
And I
in this
love
process.
that. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that's the 50% here is for demonstration purposes only. There is no goal that 1 of every 2 people decide get to go.
Correct.
Can I just respond really quickly? Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Because I was looking at the different options. It shows that you were looking through all of the different scenarios. And I was asking about one particular scenario that they were not recommending. Thank you for clarifying that and asking why. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. I think my thing is keep it simple. And we're talking about 2 areas, zone 1 and zone 2. Anything other than that is the future and may never, ever come to fruition.
All said.
Right now, we want to stabilize Stratford Road, try to equalize as best we can with Parkway without making Parkway the super school.
Correct.
So what we have to do is just like anything else, if you're building onto your house, whatever you're doing, you're planning and saying, well, this is going to be good for now, but I don't have children, but maybe one day I will. I better make sure there's extra bedrooms. So we have to make sure that Parkway has growth room in it just by the natural people coming in the area that's already been zoned for them. And as for zone 5, 6, whatever, I don't want
Term.
people walking away thinking that we have this big plan and we're going to start with 1 and 2 and next week we're going to tell them about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's not what our intent is. Our intent is to take a very large elementary building and start to take a number of children out, giving parents for the right to have their kids stay at Stratford or at POB
JJP.
Middle.
Mhm.
However, anybody new who has no ownership to any building will start at Parkway, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That being said, let us try to keep it just for the immediacy that we can do this. It's a very positive type of thing. It's going to help Stratford Road out. It's going to make Parkway feel like an elementary building with a number of kids in it and everything else. And then we can worry about anything in future, because if it's a blip, it's going to be over and we would have moved the people wherever they had to go.
Mm.
If it's not, and we keep seeing this growth, then we have another problem we're going to be talking about. And that is that our population is about 5,003 kids now around there.
50,
51.
we're,
Well, at that point, we're beginning to catch up to where we were at one point in time, but I just like to say, keeping something basic, people don't walk away with the sense that, oh my God, something else can happen. We're talking about zones 1 and 2.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
so I don't need to re-summarize all of that, but I would like to ask the board if you give us authority to do further exploration just on zone 1 and 2. I would like to reprint the maps with just the 1 and 2 on it with a summary of what the proposal is, and then bring that back to the board on March 27th with a timeline.
Yes,
So we're
everything
not
else
going to
comes
talk
out.
about anything but phase 1. So just for the record, our phase 1 recommendation is as follow. Any new family that does not have any children in the district currently that live in phase 1 and 2, we will rezone them to JJP. Any other students in grades 1 through 7 next year who live in zone 1, 2, get the choice to go to JJP or to Matlin. And families can mix it up. You could have your 3rd grader go to JJP and your 6th grader stay at POBMS if you live in zone 1 or 2.
I just want to clarify, because you just said anybody that doesn't have any students in the district, they get zoned to JJP. It's actually recommendation zone to JJP and Matlin. So if I move into zone 1 and 2.
Yes, correct.
That's a
correct.
clarification. Good
Yep.
point.
Okay.
So we'll have that all
And
on
for that
something.
data, because we're now talking about current 5th, 6th, and 7th graders, could we get the data
On
on
how many?
current 5th, 6th, and 7th graders are in zones 1 and 2, the way that you have it
Yep.
for the elementary? So before we
Yep.
kind of
Right.
finalize, we know what the exposure could be, because
No,
I don't
that's
want to have
important.
this discussion.
Right,
We'll build it out the same way we did the elementary data.
sure, right.
Awesome. Thank
And
you.
we're going to use the language incoming so that people
Yes.
understand. So we can say
Right.
incoming 1 through 8. So if you're, okay, thanks.
Wait, Tara had something she wanted to say?
Yeah, that all sounds good. K through 8, right?
Yep.
I would just ask that we try and do what we can to make sure that people are aware that we're going to be discussing this. I really don't want anyone to think that, like, since this potentially could go into effect soon, I don't want anyone to think, and again, this hopefully will minimize impact on families but just to give them the heads up and make sure. Yeah. But like Facebook message, tweet, whatever, just to make sure it's out there to the community.
I did just want to confirm, because you said kindergarteners with no prior affiliation would be
Mandatory.
zoned for JJP, and then grades 1 through 8.
Mhm.
But if you have a kindergartner in zone 1 through 1 and 2, but do have other children in the district,
You get a
you
choice.
can
You get to
still
stay.
opt in
You
or
can opt
not.
in Or stay.
Okay,
Grandfather.
so it's
Grandfather,
really
yeah.
K through 8.
Grandparent.
You have
Option.
the option.
Just one more thing, just to be very clear, I think I have this because Seth made this point too. It's JJP and Matlin. So if you're in 3rd grade, you don't have a choice to go to POB or Matlin. But when you go to middle school, you'll be going to Matlin, or if you're in 3rd grade now, you can choose Matlin.
If you're at JJP, it will feed Matlin as it currently does.
I'm
So
sorry, if you're in Stratford Road now.
if you're Stratford Road now and you stay at Stratford Road, you will go into POB Middle School. That's the natural progression. We're not looking to break those things in our plan at all.
Okay, so in current 1st graders won't be zoned for Matlin. It's kindergartner,
They would
incoming
have a
kindergartners
choice.
on.
They would have a choice to switch, but it's not going to
Okay.
be mandatory that we force them into
Glad
a
I
different middle
clarified
school.
that then. Thank you.
Families, K to 7, have a choice.
Yes,
That's it.
because if you were already in 8th grade, your
You're going to high
choice is
school.
going to the high school. Okay, does anybody want to ask for any additional information to be available at the next meeting?
6 to 8.
Other than Seth,
Yep.
yeah.
We'll build that out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I know this was a huge undertaking, but the one choice that we really have is, that we don't have, is we can't do nothing. We must do something. Okay. And now we're going to go, is it
budget.
still Monday night? We're going to go on to,
This is early by
budget
previous administration
presentations.
standards.
Yeah, but once you get used to,
Spoilers.
okay, we're doing, let me close this.
I'm not going next.
I am assuming that we're starting with 4th R. Okay. Take it away, Dr. Dillon.
He's doing it. She's not. She left.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm actually going to turn this over to Mr. Donnarumma since he's been doing such a great job all night. Huh? All right. All right.
Oh.
Thought I'd try that. So this one. So today, we have a couple more budget presentations, all good stuff. First, we're going to focus on our community-based programs. We're going to talk about 4th R, adult education, and senior citizens. So just with 4th R, you see the main budget drivers. All these programs have some form of revenue offset. So you see there's really one contractual code for this. These are programs that are great initiatives for our kids. They are offset by the fees associated with the programs. So even though there is an increase, is what we like to call a great term, budget neutral, because we see those funds coming back and balancing the budget. So there is an increase just basically due to what you see in terms of the fees associated with the different programs coming in. For adult education, similar increases. These are just the fees going up. These fees are collected from the people who attend the program. We do, again, budget neutral, and you see the increase there as well, $936 or an 18% increase. And last, for our senior citizens, which Dr. Amir and I had the pleasure of meeting with last Friday, there's a combination of different sources of revenue that they have associated with, not only what's budgeted in the general fund, but also different grants. And we have Cheryl here tonight as well. So, you do see a slight increase there in terms of the contractual expenses associated with them. This is what is budgeted in the general fund. But like I said,
between the fees that they collect from their members, the different grants associated with it. So there's different funds, but this is the portion that the school district subsidizes. And, you know, after meeting with them the other day, it was a great experience for me, because usually meeting with our seniors in certain districts I've been in, you know, usually they're yelling at you one way, but it was a great conversation talking about taxes and, you know, really how we can partnership and grow the rooms that they utilize over at Jamaica. So we talked about some facilities improvements and, you know, different ways that we can collaborate together. Parking seemed to be number one, right? Parking, a number one priority. So we will incorporate that into our facilities plan and, you know, some of our transfer to capital money as well, because, you know, as owning that building, we do have to maintain it. So those three base community programs, short and sweet. Any questions, concerns, comments?
All good programs.
All great programs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you. All right, athletics, Mr. Baker.
I think it's the ball.
Yeah. It's the one we inspired. Yes, with scholarship. This is loading it up.
Yep, I got you.
So good evening. Thank you guys for having me here tonight. Once again, thank you for all the support that the board and central administration provides the athletic, health, and physical education department. This year, you know, we will go through some of the budget drivers. We'll also talk about some of the accomplishments that we've had within our athletic, health, and phys ed programs, and also thinking about some of the projects that we're looking to as we move forward. You know, the goal of our health, athletics, health, and physical education department is students we want them to teach them the concepts necessary to pursue a life of health and fitness, but while being in an engaging, fun, and safe learning environment. That's the goal of everything that we do within our health and phys ed department, as well as on our athletic fields as well. Some of the points of pride, obviously, one of the big things that we had this year was our boys soccer team winning the Nassau County Championship, first time since 1985. It's fantastic. It was awesome. Still a little upset about the overtime game in the Long Island Championship, but I'll get over it probably in about 10 years. But another great accomplishment, Asher Block, one of our seniors, earned all region in the USA all region soccer player, the first time anyone in Plainview Old Bethpage history earned that award. Melissa Schlossman won the Nassau County Individual Championship, which is just another great accomplishment for one of our gymnasts, which is one of the best gymnastic programs in all of Nassau County. Our boys bowling team were conference champs. Brandon Nanu was just up at the state championship this past weekend and had a top 10 finish. He's only a junior, so really excited about him and what he can do next year. By the way, Marissa's only a sophomore, so that's absolutely, we got a couple more years of her. So really excited about what she can do in the future. Obviously, one of the real emphasis is that we were really excited about this year was Miss Vanessa Jackson was a New York State Teacher of the Year finalist. She's our health teacher extraordinaire up at the high school. Really does a great job with everything. Runs our alumni day, runs our blood drive. Just does a lot to really support all the students up at the high school, but does a great job of really helping teach a lot of concepts as our Health 12 classes, teaching the kids to transition from high school students to college students. The other thing that we're really proud of was our sport physiology and medicine class sport medicine class up at the high school. That was it was a new program that we put in this year. Has come off really excited. Enrollment's actually up from this year to next year, which we're excited about. We are, you know, right now we're in the second half of the year, so a lot of it we're bringing in classroom speakers to talk about different areas that kids can pursue in careers, so that they have different options to see different career pathways that they can go into. Next slide. You know, obviously our fall athletes, the varsity, the average of our varsity student athletes was 94.96. 88% of our athletes had a 90, varsity athletes had a GPA of 90 or higher. In winter, it was 93.3, and 77% of our athletes had a GPA of 90 or higher, which is just absolutely outstanding. For our student athletes, our coaches, our teachers, the parents that and everything really helping us achieve those goals. We have 4 all-state athletes, 20 all-county athletes, and we have, as of right now, we have 8 student athletes going on to play in college. Some of the initiatives that we're looking to go into next week is obviously we want to continue to grow our guest speakers on various topics to develop and continue to bring them into our school districts. Spirit Week, homecoming parade, and the game. We're going to look. There was a great experience this year getting everybody back out. We got really lucky with the weather. Mary was able to get very nice weather for us this year for it. So our goal this year is once again to build upon it, but we're going to look to do it and bring in more stakeholders into the process, getting more PTA members, getting more individual schools, and organizing so we can really make it a true community-wide event. We are going to establish a middle school girls badminton program next year. That's a really exciting thing. Our badminton program's growing. We had an intramural program kind of run on a weekend that we didn't know how many people we got. We had 70 people signed up within the first hour to take, and that was just an arbitrary. Thank God I put a limit on it. Otherwise, I think we would have had 200 people sign up for it. So, and before everyone asks, as of right now, there in Nassau County, there is no middle school boys badminton program. Otherwise, we would have had enough students to establish that program as well. From that standpoint, we are also with Mr. Dillon. We're looking to a 2-year video project of installing huddle cameras in our indoor gyms and also potential live stream so that we can potentially live stream games as well. We're looking to add, we put new wall padding in over at POB Middle School. We're looking to do the same up at the high school. Our windscreens at our tennis courts have been all blown away. So we need to order new ones, which means that they were working because they were blocking the wind. So we need to get some new ones to put up. The speaker system at the high school, we need to redesign the speaker system. What happened last year is the heat over the summer. Remember that couple of weeks where we had temperatures in the hundreds? It actually melted some of the wires in our speaker system. Like the press box got so hot that a lot of, so we don't need AC in there. There's ways around it that we can find ways to keep a fan going in there, but just to keep the system cool at that point. And the other area that we're looking to do is just, like I said, the success of the sport physiology and medicine program. We're looking to look at if there's a college level program that we can combine with, maybe work with Hofstra or CW Post or LIU Post now with the idea of about the educational program from there. Some of the biggest budget drivers from this year to last year. The first budget you can see up there is the district-wide athletic code. That is up 25%. A lot of that's due to the wall padding that we're looking to do at the JFK High School, the new sound system, some team benches for the middle school fields, on the tennis screens. A lot of these items from year to year, with everything that you're going to be hearing me say, inflation has really affected a lot of the things that we're looking to buy. So a lot of the things that were maybe $5,000 3 years ago are now looking upwards of $10,000, $15,000. So a lot of the drivers are based upon some of those. Next code is district-wide contractual and others. This code is to purchase 2 new AEDs for the district. And there's also, we have a district-wide contract with our AED service company. That contract has gone up. So we're looking to, we solely need to replace all the AEDs that we have in the district. We replaced them about 8 years ago. We're on the tail end of that. So we're going to look to phase in a couple every year so that as a district, we're not looking to replace 10 or 12 or 15 at a time. We can slowly replace them over a year. That will start this year in that project. The next code, PE supplies. The increase in this one is we typically do 2 field trips through our physical education program in 4th grade. We started and then COVID happened and then we went back again this year. In 4th grade, we take our 4th graders to a Hofstra basketball game where they get to meet the players, and they rotate between the female game and a male's game every year. So which is a great experience for all of our 4th grade students to see these high level Division I athletes participate on the field. But there is a little bit of a cost to that. That is something that we need to look into. And then the final one is we always do a project adventure one where we go to one of the challenge courses out there. which you typically used to be free through BOCES, but BOCES has increased the cost of this. So this is something that we have to do to offset it from that standpoint as well. The health supplies that we just it's down 700, but that's more of a decrease. We used to get the Great Body Shop, so we just decreased that a little bit. We don't really need, we have all the supplies for this year from this year going into next year, so just that's just a slight decrease in that. The supplies for the club, that's moving, that we move, the reason for the 40% increase that you see there is we took some of the athletic trainer supplies that we typically had within our phys ed or health or athletic supplies. We put it into this code kind of as a separate code so that we can dedicate the supplies to our athletes. One of the things that we found over the years is that with our the increase in registration of our athletes, right now we have 480 kids right now signed up for spring sports just at the high school. That's 30% of our high school student athletes registered to play athletics right now. If you look, it's fantastic. But with that, obviously the increase of like a lot more ankles need to be taped, a lot more people need different supplies and active. So moving the athletic trainers codes into their own dedicated section was something that I really wanted to do. And that's why you kind of see the increase there. And then obviously the last one that you see is the supplies for the athletics. This is, you know, a lot of the inflation. This is the increase that you see here is a lot associated to inflation across the board. And also this outfits 98 of our, we have 98 athletic teams. So the 13% increase that we're looking here is to deal with the inflation, but also deal with the growing size of our teams and what is needed out there. Obviously, as we grow teams or we add teams, as the sizes of our teams get larger, we need more supplies, we need more baseballs, we need more softballs, and jerseys need to be replenished at a little bit faster rate that we're trying to go as well from that standpoint. And that's it. Go ahead. I'm good. And as you can see, that's our year-to-year change.
Thank you. I love all of the information. Congrats to all of our students. And congrats for growing the program and keeping it going and
thank you.
Having all these teams. I think it brings communities together. It gives kids a balance, athletics or a club and academics. It's just all around. It's a healthy outlet. I guess my only question is, because I don't have any kids like 7 through 12 yet.
Right.
What do they have? Like, what are their uniform? Like, do all the kids have enough uniforms? Are they new enough? Like, I remember when I played tennis, I was wearing like leftover boy uniforms, which for obvious reasons is like not okay. But like, are we giving our athletes enough equipment and new enough equipment and like clean?
So we have a cycle, we have a pattern that we've followed over the last couple of since I started here about 10 years ago. At the varsity level, we buy new varsity uniforms every 3 years. And then so that kind of recycles, and then the JV will take the varsity uniform that comes down. We'll replace any uniforms that need that. Like, you know, a couple of years ago, we had volleyball uniforms that got very dirty with, how do I put it? Cover up. Makeup got on it and kind of got on there. So we had to replace a lot of our white jerseys from that standpoint before the 3-year cycle. But that was something. So we kind of learned that maybe white uniforms will go to more grayish uniforms for away teams. There are certain things that need to have white uniforms along those lines. But we typically do 3-year cycles up at the high school and then a 5-year cycle at the middle school. There's less games, less wear and tear down at the middle school. So we feel that the 5-year cycle through is pretty good. We just recently did about 2 years ago, we outfitted a lot of our middle school teams with new uniforms. Obviously every year there's going to be some reconditioning issues where uniforms get ripped or uniforms get lost or uniforms don't get returned. So there are things that we have to buy and replenish what we have. And then the other thing that we also do is there are some times that we get hit with, like what happened with our middle school football team this year. We had a large amount of kids that came out this year that we had a larger, just from 12th grade all the way down to 7th grade. And then what we found is that we had enough helmets, but we didn't have enough helmets the right size. So like we had a lot of larges and a lot of extra larges, but we didn't have a lot of kids that needed larges and extra larges. So we needed a little more mediums and smalls. So what we try to do is we went out and we purchased a bunch of mediums and smalls this year. Going into next year, we're going to buy a little more mediums and smalls that will kind of supplement from that standpoint too, to kind of balance it out. And then with everything that we do, I asked the varsity coaches, we sit down, we talk about what needs to be upgraded. We're going to buy some new shoulder pads for football, lacrosse, and with lacrosse, we're going to need to buy some things to update every year because helmets only have about a 3-year cycle from that standpoint. But yeah, so we try to get new uniforms in that rotation. But that doesn't mean things don't come up where we need extra ones. So for example, our flag football team last year, we bought 25 jerseys. Right now we had 55 at our practice today. So we actually ordered 25 more. We actually have to go out and buy 10 more right now to get up to the numbers that we need.
So do you think this number, this 15.5 is?
So that's an increase. It's a 9% increase over year to year. I believe I've factored in what we're looking for from last year to this year. I've always tried to maintain a good fiscal responsibility for the district and what we did. So when I typically my budget year over year is about 1% or 1.5, but this year with inflation and everything else that with the growing numbers, I do feel that a 9.4% increase is warranted at this time and will meet the needs of our students from that standpoint.
Thank you, Jared, and then Ginger.
Not a question, it's a brief statement, but it's really amazing that the boys soccer team and all the sports did so well this year, yet their academics didn't take a hit. That's really it shows how great the staff, the families are, and how much dedication went into time management. It's really just incredible.
Yeah.
Ginger?
Yeah, I'm really thrilled about the wall padding at the high school. How are other gyms? I know we've been replacing wall padding over the years.
So we did replace wall paddings at the elementary schools over the course of the time, the last couple of years. The one at the high school is the largest priority right now. It's old.
It's very old.
It's old. It's the Velcros that are holding some of them up are on the tail end of their lifespan that we have to replace the Velcro just to keep certain things up. So getting the new wall padding at the high school is definitely needed, but at the elementary schools, it was replaced. The middle school, POB middle school was replaced this year. Matlin is on, they got replaced about 10 years ago when we redid the gym at that time when we had to redo the whole floor and the whole system in there. So we replaced it it's about 10 years old. But yeah, at the elementary schools, they were done roughly over the last 10 years as well.
And just one more question. Talk to me about the helmets the kids are getting. Are there any kind of sensors on it for possible concussion hits and things like that?
So the sensors for the concussion, they're not, that was a conversation about well, it's not really it's not really tested out very well because a contact, what it does is registers the contact when you hit someone else, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get a concussion from that contact. It also depends on where you're going to get hit at what time and what speed. And there's different people have the ability to sustain certain contact over other people's as well. Me, myself, I've had 7 concussions over my course of my lifetime. So,
but the requirements
in
have
college.
been raised and our
Yes.
helmets meet those new
Okay,
increased
that's what I
requirements.
yeah, so we go by
worry
the
about
Virginia
concussions with kids.
Tech standard of ratings, and we buy 5-star helmets based upon the Virginia Tech standard, and every helmet that we buy is always rated as a 5-star helmet.
Okay, thank you.
Gary?
And I know we talk a points of pride of the success of our current athletes, but some of our alumni have done some amazing things too. At Mason University, Peter Pappas is one of our wrestlers. He's their first ever MAC championship in a title. And the AEW champion of the world is Max Friedman, who was a all-county linebacker when he played in Plainview.
Max is a wonderful, he's come back to some of our games. He does a great job really coming back to the community and coming back to our games, which is great. PD obviously was one of our last state champions. It was our last state champion in wrestling. It's actually our first state champion in wrestling in POB history. And he won the counties twice. So he's now graduating with his master's this year as well. And he's the MAC George Mason's first MAC champion. Dylan Banner, one of the other great things that just happened is that we over February break two of our Division I baseball players, Dylan Banner at Albany and Mark Vial at Hofstra, actually faced off against each other as the starting pitchers at Hofstra Field. A lot of people from the community came down to was able to watch that. It was a great experience to see Dylan and Mark on the field battling at each other, and it was a great experience. Like we put out, like every time we put out a newsletter, I love going back and trying to see what our kids are doing, what they've done and accomplished. There's some, in the winter newsletter is coming out. There's some really exciting things to come out there. Max Yari, who was up at Brockport, qualified as well did well, really well up there. We had some swimmers this year that's done some great things. So it's a really exciting time to kind of see what our kids are doing and seeing where they've gone on. And then obviously just a blatant shout out. Hall of Fame golf outing is on June 26th. We'd love to have everyone come out and be a part of to celebrate 10 members who are being inducted into our Hall of Fame from classes of 1975 all the way up to the class of 1999.
You have a question? Go ahead.
Both a comment and a question. So,
Go ahead.
okay, so couple things. First is 98 athletic teams, which is fantastic. More and more students are participating. I guess to piggyback on Ms. Rock, I think we need to make sure we have enough, the right size and appropriate uniforms. No team should be without, like every student should have a uniform. And I think we need to make sure that we refresh, we have enough, and it's appropriate, right? The booster club. I don't know if parents in the community know enough about the interplay between the role of the booster club and the athletics program. I don't know if I presume all of our coaches are trained on, when to contact whom and how things operate, right? There are teams that raise money and fundraisers. It goes through the booster, what it goes for, the relationship that exists. And I think it's really important for, even if coaches are aware of it, and maybe not all coaches, maybe they need refreshers. But that information is shared with parents, because I don't know, a lot of questions that they have. You may be fielding questions that should go to boosters. Boosters may be fielding questions that should go to you. It may go through, like, there's a chain of command in the school. There's a chain of command in the athletic program, right? Where you have, like, it should go to the coach and then to you. I don't know, how better to get it out there, but I think it's really important to convey that to, maybe in some of your meetings when you have, I know the boosters are everywhere and they push it out. They meet with us as the PTAs do. And I know they're growing, but there's a lot of confusion of where you go and who to go to. And perhaps there's a way to communicate that in the beginning of every season, or refresh people's understanding of the right approach and who to work with.
I mean, the Booster Club over the last several years has done a great job of really expanding and growing. They are trying to always constantly look at areas that they can improve. And, the great thing is, like you said, that it is a group of people that are dedicated to improving athletics and giving back to the community. So as we get more parents involved, as we get more of our coaches involved, it's only going to grow. And the more that it grows, the more that we can give back to the kids from that standpoint. So, yeah.
I just had one quick question. I don't know if there would be teams to play against, but have we considered, or are we considering middle school flag football? Because I see, like, all the young girls are all playing flag football on the weekend.
Yeah.
And I know we have high school teams.
So as of right now, Section 8 hasn't brought forward the idea of doing a middle school flag football program. We are actually the only team with a JV flag football team right now. A lot of which is great. We're really at the forefront. Our community is really behind it. The support that you guys have given us to help us grow that program is great, because there is a large interest here in flag
don't.
football.
That's why.
So, but as of right now, the Section 8, which Section 8 athletics hasn't proposed it. I do foresee it coming fairly soon in the future. Right now is really the second year of it, even at a varsity level. I foresee probably going into next year, you'll hear more teams saying that they want to have a more fully formed JV schedule. And then I would probably see in 2 years, probably a middle school schedule being fully created by Section 8 at that time.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's super exciting.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you
you.
so much, Joe. And we're going to jump down to PPS budget.
Try to get some of our administrators home a little earlier tonight.
I think that ship has sailed, but
Well,
yeah, we're going to go back because Chris is hanging out anyway.
it's a Lorna night. Yes. Sorry, Lorna. It's a Lorna. So Chris is driving the presentation.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you for the support the board and community have always given to special needs students and families within our community. The core mission and vision of our district to provide resources that allow all students to feel a sense of belonging while focusing on academic excellence is evident in this budget and the robust services and programs that it supports.
Sorry. Our goals here, as you see, align with our district's mission, vision, core values, and strategic plan. Again, we cannot thank you enough for allowing us to be a part of this great work. As you see by the goals we continue to work on, we're committed to academic excellence for all by ensuring specially designed instruction in all of our programs along the continuum of services. The resources allocated PPS special education allow for the creative programs and professional development that support our students and staff. The alignment with academic excellence is evident in the success students with IEPs experience in their postgraduate endeavors, as you see here. Oh, as you see there. The appropriate and rigorous learning experience to prepare students with IEPs for post-high school success. Our special education offerings support students in developing a vision of who they want to be by connecting each student to multiple pathways to success, as is one of the priority objectives of our district strategic plan. So our points of pride show how we engage students in lessons and programs that are aligned to research-based educational practices that increase their acquisition of skills and knowledge to stimulate their engagement while targeting social and emotional and mental wellness of all students. Our mental health worker and behavior specialists continue to provide workshops for families using a variety of mediums related to mental health and wellness and behavior while providing resources to staff to inform, maintain, and address mental wellness as well. The variety of programs we offer provide opportunities for students to define who they are and the life they want to design while ensuring inclusion of students with special needs. And finally, we continue to be called on to share our collaboration with Northwell and our specialized life skills ABA and ICT programs with neighboring districts and the professional organizations that we belong to in order for them to imitate our models. So on the next slide. Yep. So excellence in our education programs is evident in the growth of our incoming students with special needs in all of our special education programs, but especially in our ABA Life Skills program, where we educate students with autism and intellectual disabilities who require intensive support and increased staff ratios. This here shows the growth over the last 3 years. However, this program was developed in 2004 and began with only 2 classes at our elementary level and cross-contracted students to supplement the Plainview residents. As you see here now, we've grown to 11 classes filled with all Plainview residents, indicating families have joined our community for our rich programs. Our numbers of students with autism is statistically relevant when compared to the prevalence rate globally. In addition to this program, we manage a number of students on the spectrum throughout our other programs, which require increased staffing ratio with trained aides to support behavior and assist students in accessing education in the least restrictive environment. Okay, so our budget drivers. So this slide's a tough one to review, due to the state cuts we face in the presence of the unique needs of the 1% of our population here. Our budget drivers are really a product of the mental health crisis that we were all discussing prior to the COVID pandemic, coupled with the impact of COVID closure on our students with special needs, engaging in non-traditional education, or having difficulty returning to school, and an overall increased enrollment of students with IEPs. We've seen an increase in students requiring more specialized intensive services, and there's been a marked increase in the cost of those services and students who require out-of-district and residential programs. And that's really where you see all of these particular lines, our increases fall. And I won't go into explaining each one unless there's specific questions on them because of the late hour. Jared?
So just to clarify, the tuition to New York State public schools, those are for services that we just can't provide here for whatever reason and somewhere else is able to provide.
Yeah. So codes 471, 472, and 492 are all related to tuition for other outside of our district. That really is only 46 students district-wide, which is really less than 1% of our population. But that's where a lot of our expenditures are now.
And in that vein, I would imagine that to have those services for so few students would probably cost us more than the tuition elsewhere would.
Yeah, so we are always looking at that, and we're really, we're excited about our career path program that we were able to create this year that helped us in that vein. And every annual review, we're looking to bring students back, but it really has to be the perfect cohort of students. It has to be the right age group, the right course offerings, the right types of disabilities to bring back, but we are always looking at that.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for all the work you do for these students.
Thank you.
Ginger?
Yeah, just thank you.
Oh.
This is our point of pride when we see children who you thought could never graduate, go on to college, be able to find a career, our life skills, teaching kids how to exist day by day. And so many people just don't realize what goes into one child.
Yeah.
And many times, I think we just really touched on it. We have placements we have no control over because we can't service that child.
And there's not a
Children
lot of
have
those students.
such severe disabilities that people just don't know because they're not in a school, you're not seeing them. But we give them a life and we give them hope of a future. And thank you for everything and your staff. This is phenomenal.
Oh, great. You're welcome.
Tara?
Thank you. So I think, we service such a wide range of student learners here and people and little to big people. And their needs are very differing. And, every child's needs just as important as the next child's needs. So it's so important that we do meet them and we meet them where we need to. I guess I would just comment that, hopefully we'll continue to be able to use the interventions that we have in place for students before they get to the point where they may need to be classified. And perhaps as we continue to, look at scores on things like our NWEA, if we use those tools that we have and those tests and the feedback from the teachers and combine it all early enough, some students perhaps might be able to have their needs addressed without actually having to go through the special ed continuum. And if they do, perhaps at some point they'll be able to exit or to have reduced services. Not that, that's cost is a driver of that whatsoever when it comes to their education. But my hope is that as we continue to improve those types of things, the RTI, that we'll be able to see hopefully a decrease in when students get to a point where it's kind of a breaking point for them, and we're able to pick it up earlier and address the needs earlier so that they don't spiral.
So along those lines, our MTSS goal district-wide will absolutely be addressing that. The fact that we've district-wide really started to look at chronic absenteeism much earlier on will start to address those issues so that we're kind of picking up those kids earlier. Absolutely. I see early intervention is key for us.
And then also even for our students who are classified and may need additional reading or math and things like that, that the tools that we have and the tools that we're constantly looking at and seeing if we can improve, that we're able to use those so that our kids can meet with greater success as they get older with the interventions we're putting in place for them through their program.
Which is a large part of our professional development that you saw in the points of pride. We continually are developing skills necessary to address the most cutting edge programs and in reading and math and mental health as well.
The CTE is exciting. It's just very exciting to be able to meet the children at all the areas and, each part of the spectrum. It's really important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Gary?
First, I want to say that our special ed program is a crown jewel of pride. People move to our community for what we offer. And the comments I want to make are not now about the students who we do a great job with here, but the ones that don't stay here. I understand that a lot of the numbers on your budget drivers are driven by things that are at times out of our control. But this level of growth is unsustainable.
Agreed.
If we keep growing at this level, it'll become 15, 20, $30 million.
Yep.
And you've noted it's for 1% of the population. We've got to start doing some things differently to keep some of those things less contentious, more in line, so that these kids will stay and allow the programs we have to be successful for them. Because I feel so strongly how great our program is. So
I
it's,
agree.
what can we do I think the only way we can contain these numbers is of the growth in the kids leaving the district for private tuitions outside of us, is to do a better job selling what we do here, making parents confident that we're delivering the best possible solution to them, and making sure that really, if it gets contentious, that we've got a roadmap that isn't just to roll over. And I don't want to sound like I'm a hardliner. I believe fully in everything we're doing here to keep our kids here. But it's costing too much when they don't stay here.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think there are a few things that we can look at along those lines. First of all, I'm really hopeful that the further we get away from COVID and the pandemic, that we will start to see a leveling off. And we are starting to see a little bit of a leveling off in the fact that our risk assessments, we're not seeing as many high risk assessments as we were seeing the last 2 years. So we are starting to see some help there. We are working very closely with our SEPTA to make sure that families really understand what we have available to us. Almost each month, we have someone from in-district presenting on our programs, our reading programs, our assistive tech programs, our programs for our visually impaired and hearing impaired, et cetera. As we said, we continue to look to bring students back each year at annual review. The MTSS process is absolutely going to impact that. Your advocacy about, up at State Ed to help us to work alongside the people who come to our tables to bridge gaps as opposed to building walls is absolutely something that's so important. We'll be training staff in CSE procedures. Everyone gets some training when they're coming through
school. And then you come to a meeting and it's absolutely nothing like what you were trained in. We have experts on staff who will be developing for our professional development this year. Courses that will be mandatory for general ed and special ed teachers to come to talk about what's my role at the CSE, you know, what can I feel comfortable and confident saying in spite of some of those more difficult meetings. So those are some of the ways that we're looking to address that, because I agree. I didn't want to get up here to talk about these numbers tonight. I don't want to sustain it. I don't ever want to say these numbers out loud or again. We need to be working on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dolores, thank you so much
You're
for this presentation and to you and your department for all that you do for our kids, particularly for our neediest kids. So thank you.
And thank you for the support. Thanks.
Okay, which one are we going to do now? Are we going back to transportation?
Want to hear from Chris. It's been a while.
It's true.
All right. Here we go again. All right, so I'm going to run you through my my budget presentation for next year. I'll try to make this as quick as possible and answer any questions at the end as always. So I like the new perspective on the budget presentation where it ties back to the strategic plan. So in my area where we're talking about transportation, health and safety, registration, all the different things that my office helps to support in the district, really we tie into the strategic plan in area 4, connections and collaboration. I won't go into really the specifics, but it's all about the district welcoming committee recommendations and the support of those. The strategic plan priority area number 5, finance and facilities, is another area where the work really ties into to make sure that we're doing the best with what we have, making the most in our decisions. You have the details there that you could read more about at your leisure. When we talk about transportation points of pride, just going to roughly go through, we transport each and every day about 5,500 students to and from school. Roughly, 5,250 are in district, but we also transport over 200 students to 28 private and parochial schools. Back to special education, we transport approximately 40 students to 19 different special education placements. That's one less student than last year. When we talk about private and parochial, we're transporting 2 more to 2 additional schools than last year. One less school for special ed. But that's not all in transportation. On a daily basis, we also support work study programs for special ed, Project Challenge, Discovery Lab, Fun Time, Twilight Program, et cetera, et cetera. So it's good to be part of the mix. When we talk about transportation, who transports our students? We transport, it has over 91% of daily transportation of those 5,500 students. In district, we do run 2 vehicles